Yes, we're ready.
So, okay, whenever you guys are ready. Just let me know when we're live.
We're live.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday, November 9th, 2022 Educational Support and Student Achievement Committee meetings. We're going to begin tonight meetings starting off with the Education Support Committee. And but first, before we get started with our program, let's hear a few words from the district with the transportation update. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tanja Williams this evening, and she will begin open remarks for transportation update for the district.
Thank you so much, Chairman Hurd, and greetings to all of our board members, staff, and anyone that may be watching and or listening in. We felt it was important tonight to share an update on where we are with the transportation reimbursement for parents. There's been a lot of interest in that program, and so I just want to recap and share that over the summer we put together a committee, Operation Sunrise, and there were multiple stakeholders that were involved in that committee, and they explored various opportunities to help ensure the transportation safety for all of our students. One of such was that they would explore the possibility of reimbursing parents to see what impact that could make, if any. And so after the committee met for several times, a survey went out to the public, to our parents, including a translated model of that survey, to see if there was interest from parents in the possibility of them receiving reimbursement for transporting their children. And there was enough interest from that survey that we then had several community forums to go a little deeper into the process. And we did that. We received back quite a bit of data. And so that data is now in the process of being analyzed, but we do have some preliminary information with you that we want to share, looking at what impact, if any at all, based on all that we've done and the data that we've gotten back, where we are. And so I've asked Cheryl Kennedy, who is our Director of Transportation, if she wouldn't mind coming this evening and just sharing a very brief preliminary overview with our board members on where we are in the process. So I'll turn things over to you, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Good evening, board members. Admir, if you could put the presentation up. Thank you. So as Dr. Williams was saying, we put an online survey out to parents to see who would be interested in receiving reimbursement and opting their students out of transportation yellow bus services. So we received 2,388 respondents. Of that 2,388 individual students, 258 were actually duplicates. So we're going to reduce that total by a little bit. And then there were also some schools that we do not provide yellow bus service to. For example, Tapestry Charter School. We actually had 352 respondents from that school alone. That's actually the highest number of respondents from any particular school that we received. So that's not going to have a major impact or any impact really on our yellow bus totals when we look at the Tapestry numbers. One of the things that we have to dig deeper on, the survey did not include student identification numbers. So in order for me to import that data into our routing software, we're going to have to attach the student ID numbers, and then we're going to look at home to school distance and eligibility factors. So Dr. Williams did mention that this is preliminary. That's one of the areas that we need to dive deeper into to see how many of those 2,388 participants are actually eligible to receive yellow bus services. So when we take those numbers away, again, the 258 duplicates and the 352 tapestry students, we're looking at 1,778 possible seat reductions. So these are students that parents have said we're going to opt them out of transportation. That opens up a seat on a school bus. There were respondents from 86 different school sites, and I'm going to show you some of those, excuse me, in the next few slides. But the average number of students per school that responded and want to take advantage of the reimbursement and opt out of yellow bus transportation is 22 students. And I think I've spoke at previous meetings before, in order to really eliminate a school bus at any one school location, that number needs to be around 50. Again, when we're looking at populations in schools, because we're a choice district, our students are spread out across the entire city to attend any given school within the district. So if I have 22 students that live all across the entire city, there's no real reduction in the number of buses that service that school. So I do want to point out that there were several schools that did have, did provide numbers that would accommodate reducing the number of buses at that school by either 1 or 2. And those were Montessori, School 64, School 81, Southside, Mikowski, Olmsted 156, City Honors, Elmwood Village Charter School, and Persistence Prep Charter School. Because those schools are both early or late, we're looking at a total reduction based on these numbers of 4 total buses. Edmir, if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is just showing the actual data, and it lists every single school that we had respondents from. So you can see school 3, we had 34 respondents. Of that number, we've already had 7 parents contact the transportation department and say, we don't need yellow busing. So they're already opted out. So the new number is actually only 27. With 27 students, again, I can't really reduce a bus at that school. I do want to point out 32 is one of the schools I mentioned that we will be able to reduce a bus based on these respondents. They had a total of 148 respondents that want to opt out. 65 are currently already opted out. I don't know if those respondents are the same students, because again, I need that student ID information to cross-reference, but even if they're completely new opt-out students, I could possibly reduce by 1 bus. The reason for that low number, I know the student counts seem very high, but Montessori has our 3-year-old nursery school program. So the number of car seats are going to be a factor in how many buses I can reduce and what the ages are of the students that are actually opting out. So for every big bus, I can only put 8 students that ride in a car seat on that bus. So that's a factor, which is going to offset some of the actual reductions. School 64 also had a high number of respondents. So I believe that's 107, 30 of which, I'm sorry, my screen's very small here, had previously opted out, which leaves a new opt-out total of 82. There I could probably reduce 2 buses, but now that's an early school. So now I have to find a late school that also could reduce 2 buses as well. So Edmir, if you can just scroll to the next page. So yep, and then again, it lists all of the schools, charter schools, agencies, any school that we received a response with this survey is listed here. How many students have previously opted out, as well as how many respondents and how many route reductions we could conceivably accomplish with those opt-outs.
Mrs. Kennedy, could you be a little more clear on, you use the term opted out, so we all be clear and understand what that means?
Sure. So prior to the survey, we had, we had parents call us and tell us that they did not want to utilize yellow bus services. So we're calling that an opt-out of transportation services. So we had about 940 students prior to this survey that were already opted out of transportation services. The new number of respondents that are saying they want to take advantage of the reimbursement and opt their children out of transportation services is, again, the 2,388 number, less those reductions that I talked about earlier. Did that clarify for you?
Well, yes, thank you, Mrs. Kennedy.
Yes. Are there any other questions?
I have a question on that clarification that you just made. I need further clarification. Wouldn't it be that 900 number minus, or I'm sorry, the 1,778 minus 900, because the 2,388, you determined that there were duplicates, and 352 that couldn't be included because they're tapestry students?
You're correct. Yeah. So if we're looking at the 1,800 roughly, the previously opted out students may not be actually part of that subset, though. Does that make sense?
But the previously opted out are currently not using bus transportation.
That's correct.
So it's not going to, only the new opt-outs are actually going to free up seats.
Correct. Correct.
Are there any more? Are you finished with your presentation, Mrs. Kennedy, or should we allow more board questions at this time?
I am finished with the presentation.
Okay, so if any board members have any questions or like to have input, please raise your hand and we can add you in. Okay, I have City Hall.
Can you hear me now, Terrence?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. I have just two questions. I hope just two. First question, Cheryl. Did you guys disaggregate this data versus our special needs student population?
I have not been able to dig into that yet because, again, I need the student ID numbers.
Okay. Second question, what was the difference between our first population of people who applied and then our second population when we put it into the multiple languages?
That I don't have the answer to. I don't know if Ramona would have the answer. I was just given the final survey results.
Okay.
I can pull that data for you. I know it was 100-ish, 130-ish additional respondents, but I'll get the exact number. Give me just a bit. Give me just a minute.
Okay. And then that our typical population is about 22% for English language learners. I'm just trying to think what our ELL population is. A little bit lower. I'm getting a signal from the sidelines. It's a little bit lower. I'm just trying to come up with a gross number just to try and see what our population is about. Okay. I'm being told it's being worked on right now. Those are the two questions that I have. Sharon, do you have anything while we have the mic?
Well, I could have scripted this if you wanted to know the truth. I didn't know the date or time, but I knew that this was going to be the result. So what I'm asking at this point is, what is this district and board going to do to make sure that children get off the streets and get to school? I have not seen a report this year that talks about how many children are standing on the corners, how many kids are not getting to school on time. I have not seen anything. I don't know why the transportation committee, or I don't know when they plan to meet again or whatever, but as a board member, I find it very difficult to be having this conversation without having that data so that the board can assess the entire situation as to how grave it is or how not grave it is, okay? And so for me, I want to know details. I want to know how many children, How many buses are unattended? How many children and what time they're getting to school? I want the details because that's the only way that I can understand what's going on out there with these children. It's about to get cold out there. Okay, it's about to get cold, and I need additional information for my purposes because I could have scripted this. So this conversation I was expecting, but I am not, I have a major concern that the bell times have not been changed in this district, and I want to hold the board and ask the board their opinions on this, because if without that data, Cheryl, we don't know if we have a crisis or not. We just might be thinking that there's something, but without the data. So I appreciate if we can have that data as soon as possible. When I think about a transportation update, it's sort of hard for me to understand where we are without additional information. So thank you for my 2 bits. That's it.
Thank you, Mr.
So-
Sutton. Dr. Williams, you have something? A comment?
I just want to say, I want to thank everybody for the comments. It probably will be difficult to give an exact number of the students that were standing on bus stops, but we could give an average because, Cheryl, if I'm correct, it's different students or different buses each evening, but we could certainly give an average, and then we could also give an average time that students are, the last bus is dropping students off, because we certainly get that information every evening. So we could give an average time of that. And then, the average of the buses that tend to be late. But it would be difficult to give an exact number because it's different every day.
Well, I appreciate that, Madam Superintendent. However, are the numbers being collected daily? If they're being collected daily, then I don't need I need a weekly total. I shouldn't have to have an average. I should be able to have the actual numbers if they're being collected daily. And that's what I'm concerned about. We want to average up something when in essence, I need to know the exact number. Is it 10 buses a day? Is it 15? How many children are on those buses? This is just some basic stuff. I mean, if we're monitoring it, certainly we have staff that's not even allowed to enjoy their evenings until these buses these children are off the bus. And in fairness to them, I know they have the data. We need to know what's going on a daily basis, because in order to move it to the next level, for me as a board member, I need to make sure that I have a clear picture of what's going on. And that also will include holding first student responsible, okay, as well. So it's not just my responsibility as a board member or as a district to make sure. I need to know what's going on, how many babies, and I want to know by my district. Does that mean in the Ferry district that I need to go out there and pick them up when the sub-zero weather is out there? I want to know what's going on in my district as well. So I thank you for that, but I feel that there should be enough data at this point that we should have an idea of what's going on a daily basis in this district. Now, I don't know how you want to do it, average it, do whatever you want to do with it. I just want the data is what I want. Because I don't think it's fair for the board not to have a clear picture and be in this situation and not be in a position to fully assess what's going on. It's an accountability piece here. Let one of us happen to one of those children. Let something happen to a child and it gets frostbitten. Okay? We are responsible for that child once they leave the house until they return. And so I want to be clear with that. That's what I want to be clear about, Mr. President.
Thank you. Real quick, I just want to, because I just received the information. Thank you, Ann. So it looks like about 17 and a little bit higher percentage of our kids are ELL students, which is about 1,700 students, 17 and a little bit shy of 1,800 students. So we had 100 out of that population of 1,800 that said that they'd be interested. I'm just trying to give some perspective.
That exact number is 150 who said that they might be interested.
Okay. All right, so somewhere around 8%. 9%, okay. All right, thank you.
8.7.
So is this board going to eventually have a conversation sometime about the bell time situation that we've encountered?
I'm sorry, Dr. Sharon, We have a couple questions from some other board members. First was Jennifer McCosey, and we also have Paulette Woods. So I'm going to ask Jennifer to take the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. I would like to see us as a board and the
I think Ms. McCosey has been frozen. So until she's able to reconnect, let's go with Board Member Woods.
Thank you. Thank you. My hand had been up for a while, but it kept going down. I was listening to the report on how many children and parents
demands that and to the issue without really taking the entire issue into
I'm sorry, Ms. McCosey. Ms. McCosey,
Yes.
you froze for a period of time. So you
Oh, I'm
want to
sorry.
restart? Okay.
Okay, good. Then I can rephrase this a little. Hopefully I can make this cleaner. I just would like for us to consider in the future, and especially with this piece, is we sit down and really look into, for the sake of time, because as Board Member Cotman pointed out, it's about to get really cold. It was freezing just yesterday and it's going to be 70 tomorrow. Buffalo doesn't play around with weather. So if we could look into, before we put a survey out, something like the 900 number to identify the actual students, I would have assumed would be a part of that survey conversation. The fact that we had to go back and make sure we translate it. These things, to me, if we weren't so reactive without kind of sitting back and taking everything into account, it was why I suggested we table it, that in that 3 months, we go into exactly what Board Member Cotman was talking about. What is the data? Who are the ones standing on corners? How do we go about this where we're going to pay parents to bring their students to school as a beginning measure to deal with this crisis? But how does that feed into the other pieces, right? So I'm just asking that moving forward, we really take into account everything that's being said. I know that we are all trying to make sure we are there and take care of and listen to our constituents. And, you know, all of us have different approaches as to how we do it, but we all agreed on this. So my suggestion is, you know, let's take into account all of this data. Let's have the conversation about the bell times, because that is just hanging over us with an actual possibility of making things a little bit better, but the timing around that, and there's so many issues around that too. So we got to really structure our conversations. And as Board Member Cotman asked, as a board member, this is how I would like to move forward, is to be more thorough with how we go about the next steps. We already have some data collected. Thank you so much, Cheryl. You broke it down in a real way that anyone on the call and myself and anybody else can understand. So I appreciate that. But moving forward, some of these things were kind of lost because of the urgency that we put into the issue, which is not a bad thing at all. It's just how do we collectively come together to address urgency, not even versus, but urgency, and also, you know, moving with time constraints that are necessary for us to be able to do this in a way that makes sense and we don't have to kind of backtrack. That's my only request.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. McCosey. And next we have Paulette Woods.
I was hoping you could clarify your data, because at one point I thought I heard you say the 900 students that have previously opted out are not included in this 1,900 students in this list. So is this the number of students opt out? Is it 900 in addition to this list that you're talking about? Because you've already taken out the duplicates, you've taken out the 336 students that are for a charter school. So what are you saying is the number? What does the 900 get added to this? What's the actual number?
So, excuse me. So the 900 should not be included in this number. Those 900 students are already opted out. We're not providing transportation services to them.
Okay, so the number now is just under, you're saying just under 2,000. Then the other couple questions are really straightforward. As Lou pointed out, the number of special ed children, aren't their buses smaller so that there would be more buses that would be reduced if those children, wouldn't more buses be freed up if the children are special ed?
That is possible. So we have to dig deeper. Once I have those student ID numbers, we can dig into that and see if that's the case.
And then my other question is, when you said that you needed 50 students to free up a bus, does that include the possibility that if you've got 25 students at one school and 25 or 30 at another school, there isn't a way to combine those two so that the bus route frees up a bus? Can you look into that possibility?
So, so the way we're structured, we have a certain number of buses that service a given school. We have very few buses that will service multiple schools because of our bell times, because they're not able to get to two schools at the same time. So reducing a bus with 25 kids at one school, it won't impact another school.
Okay, all right, that's a fair answer. With regards to this issue, we started raising this issue, it's going on almost 2 years now. So is there a reason why we keep coming up to, after the first year and now having a committee for this year, which we thought was gonna have an answer for September? Is there any reason why we can't tackle this and actually come up with the data, reaching more people and getting this done?
So I will just say that in a very short period of time, the committee really has done a lot. And, I'm not sure if there is another one of the big 5 districts, that we could even look at as a prototype. So the committee did look at larger districts like Philadelphia. I believe they tried it, but they've already, scratched it for whatever the reason. But I just want to reassure the board that the committee did a tremendous amount of work in a really short period of time between July and now, as far as finding a company that would be able to, cut the checks. We've talked to the state ed department. We've talked to our big 5 partner. The committee has been meeting, and it's not to make excuses, but it is to share that, the staff has put a lot of work and time into, creating the surveys and getting them out, collecting that data, getting it disaggregated, getting things interpreted. But we wanted to come to you tonight to let you know that the work is still continuing, and we're still very serious. We're cognizant that winter is coming, and it'll be here any day now. And so, we're taking it further. I'm not sure about 2 years ago, but since July, there's been quite a bit to move this forward. We're very serious about it, and we can certainly get together the data that the board members would like to have as far as each week. Are there patterns of schools that are consistently late? How many of the children are impacted, specifically the schools in your districts? I believe that we can collect that data. That's not difficult for us to do. But we are moving forward with this initiative, but we have to do it carefully because we don't have a prototype. We don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to overprescribe. But we do want to, react to what our parents and constituents are sharing with us. And I think that's what Cheryl shared tonight, that, we have approximately 1,778 parents who have indicated that they are interested. So now we have to have staff look into who are what are their 900 numbers, and, what schools are they at? Are there families of children, or are there individual children? And, we're committed to doing that.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And is it possible that we can use one email chain from the board members to reach out to Mrs. Kennedy and Dr. Williams about our questions and what our ask is, for
Sure.
the transportation department to look into, and that way we all can be on the same track moving forward about what our needs are for our children and how can we try to find a good resolution for this busing issue. Next, I believe we still have a hand raised in City Hall. We'll go back to City Hall and then Larry Scott.
Sorry, Terrence, our hand won't go down here. I'll try and lower it mechanically again.
Okay, great. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. So it's, just to clarify, it's 878 students that would be potentially eligible for this program to opt out, to make a difference and free up seats. Did we stipulate to parents that those that are currently opted out, that they wouldn't be eligible?
So first, Mr. Scott, I'm not sure where you're getting the 800 number from. It's more like 1,800, 1,700 based on this survey.
Well, you said 900 are already opted out of the 1,778.
But I don't know if those are included in the respondents because I don't have the student ID numbers. These may be brand new 1,800 students.
So
These
on
may be on top of the previously opted out.
On the charts that you shared, it says previous opted out, new opt out. You're saying those numbers might not be accurate?
So what I'm showing on the chart is if they are included, that final number of bus reduction would be equal to that. But I don't know that that's for sure until after we dig deeper.
Okay.
Okay.
And then
Well,
it looks like,
I wanted to show the board members. I'm sorry for
go ahead.
interrupting, but I wanted to show what the lowest amount of bus reductions could possibly be right now.
Okay. And it looks like City Honors, Olmsted 64, and Bennett Park Montessori had the highest amount of respondents. The other thing, we talked about Philadelphia's model last year, and we received something from Philadelphia on how it had a minimal impact last year. I remember that. So the staff are working so hard. Ms. Kennedy, I know that you work tirelessly to, combine routes, to do everything you possibly can to address this issue. And we did get an update, I think it was last month, on transportation from Mr. Hills. And it did reflect improvement, especially in morning. It was the afternoon, and there were maybe a list of 8 schools that still are problematic. I know School 81 is a school where there are some buses that leave quite late. I guess I would just say, yes, the cold weather is a major issue, but it, I guess, is some relief that the morning routes, so right at this point, we seem to be making some headway. And so students are less likely to be waiting long times in the morning. And in the afternoon, they're in a school building. They're not just waiting outside, even though it is still problematic that they're getting home at late hours. So I want to circle back to somewhat what Sharon said. And first student, I said this a few months ago, we're paying almost $9 million per year to them. We want to work in partnership with them, and we have done that. But I know that this has been an issue long before the pandemic, where we've had questions. We've had concerns about them failing to deliver entirely on the contract that we have with them. So I think First Student needs to step up and bear some of this responsibility, because I feel like the district, our staff have done so much, and I think it's time at least for them to present to us again and give us an indication on what they can do as the provider for this transportation to help in addressing any additional challenges that we're facing.
Thank you for that. And I do want to point out for the past 2 days, today and Monday, we were fully covered in the morning. We had no buses uncovered. Everyone got picked up.
I don't know if I can be heard. Am I?
Go ahead, Mr. Hills.
I'm sorry, somebody interrupted.
That was David.
Oh, I'm sorry. Board Member Scott, forgive me. I'm at a Chief Operating Officer conference in New Orleans, and I've just wanted to say a couple things. One, thank you, Cheryl, for all the hard work you've done, and Ramona Reynolds has done a lot of work. But to talk about, I know there was the September update. I sent a PowerPoint to Ramona, Will, and Dr. Williams that they can share that has an included October update graph on raw numbers, and kind of does the same thing of numbers of schools impacted. It's actually for October, different schools impacted. Our worst day in our first week of October was kind of rough, and our last week of October was rough. In the middle, we had a good stretch. But our worst day in October was still several hundred kids less in the afternoon impacted than our worst day in September. And I do have to say, Cheryl's right. We did have 0 routes uncovered several mornings this week. And also last week, we had a couple times where we were all clear by 6:30, which may not seem like a huge accomplishment, but it is very, very massive. So I've shared that update with kind of basically 4 slides and then a slide on the 3 bell schedule. And so that can be shared with the board if anyone's willing to or able to forward that on.
Thank you, Mr. Hills. And I think that would just be very helpful to continue to get those updates, because it really informs us in communicating with others, but also when we're making decisions on remedies. I think it's also very helpful to see that we are making some headway, and the staff that are involved in making that headway should be commended, because we know that the crisis exists beyond Buffalo, nationwide, and the fact that we're making progress with this crisis still looming is something to be commended. So thank you, everybody, for that update. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott. As we move forward, I would just like to, first of all, thank the staff, Mrs. Kennedy, Dr. Reynolds, Dr. Tanja Williams, Mr. Hills, and others who has been putting this together, because it's very important for our children. And I'm very optimistic about this program. I'd just like to say that, through all the work and the numbers that we're looking at right now, for me, it's not about reducing all the buses that we possibly can, but getting children off the corners at a feasible time, getting to school at a reasonable time. And if we can continue on in a pathway where we can take 17 kids, 30 kids, 37 kids from each school, then we have a pathway to move forward. But before I go on, I know that Mrs. Woods has a question, and then I'll continue.
I commend that you're happy about inching forward and making progress. And the gentleman, the CFO, just came on and said that they reduced the number of children standing on the corner by a couple hundred. Does he have the number that are still remaining to stand on the corner, since he's looking at a report? Because we're not asking about the 200 that got removed off the corner. We're asking, are we looking at 2,000, 3,000? All we ask for, how many are still on the corner? And the answer was, oh, well, one day this week we got everybody in the morning picked up. I mean, can we just speak plainly? Is it 2,000? Is it 3,000? You're looking at the numbers. If you're going to share, just share that, because that's what we need to understand. How bad is what size, what is the magnitude of the impact on the community and the number of children? Any numbers?
Thank you, Board Member Woods, and that very much appreciated. The PowerPoint Dr. Reynolds should have sent to you. It has a day-by-day breakdown of exact numbers of children impacted for both AM and PM routes. And so you can see exactly for each day on that PowerPoint. There's one slide for September, which was shared with the board already for the September update, and one slide for October. Because I'm on my phone right now, not necessarily in the best place to look at my computer screen, I can't quote those numbers for you, but they should have been emailed to you. If you look at the fourth slide of that PowerPoint, you'll see a graph that Cheryl sends out every month at the end of the month. That shows exact numbers. And there's no day where we're looking at the kinds of numbers you're talking about. I believe the highest day for October, and I'm going by memory, so Cheryl, you can jump in if you remember, I think it's 1,400 in one afternoon. But we had a lot of days where they were not, they were half or a quarter of that. So, but again, you can see the outline of the problem, and no one is at peace with where we're at. No one's happy with the incremental progress, but you can see the outline of what each day brings, and that it changes very dramatically from day to day.
I respect that. Thank you. As a manager, I deal with means, averages, modes, range, size of the problem, and the magnitude of the problem. I appreciate you speaking as a manager that you're saying it goes from 700 to 1,400 children. So I can understand how many parents are going to be impacted. And I can know that before the community comes and is very upset and is having emergency meetings. So I greatly appreciate you speaking to me as a manager. Thank you.
And I will commit to, as soon as Cheryl gets those updates to me, I will just add to that PowerPoint every month, so that even if we don't have a scheduled agenda meeting, we'll make sure that gets out to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Hills. Thank you so much for your work and your continued work. Continuing on, I would just like to say that that we, if you look at the buses that's going in the city of Buffalo with our children on it, and the bus drivers and bus aides, the buses are crowded in the morning and they're crowded in the evening. And we have an opportunity to remove some of those kids from the bus lines. That means other kids will be getting home at an earlier time, and other children will be getting to school at a better time. And continuing today, we still have some buses that come late because of the number of children that we pick up. So anytime any possible we can reduce the number of children that's being picked up on the bus route, it'd be a positive moving forward. So I'm glad that we're taking this place and taking the time to look into the measures and what we can do to make this program be successful. With the target schools, and even as we mentioned, the charter school kids, those are children also. Those are children in our neighborhood, so and family members. So if it can help the charter programs also, we will be doing a service for our community. I do believe what Mr. Scott and Miss Sharon said, that about first student holding them responsible, so we can move them. But I would also like to see us target some more schools with notification to the parents, maybe letterheads or letters sent out to the parents at our schools with a low response rate, and maybe we can up it a little bit. I know that y'all did a robust job with social media, reaching the news stations, and also reaching out to parents through the surveys. But a lot of our parents don't look at surveys. A lot of our parents don't know how to access to get onto surveys. So we can maybe send some literature home with some of the children. Maybe we can have a better response moving forward. So I don't want to keep going forward with this, because we know that districts is going to give us some more feedback, and we also continue to ask the board members on the email chain that we can reach out to the district moving forward, so that we can have some of our questions answered and help our community.
Excuse me, Mr. Hurd, my hand has been up for a minute.
Oh, I couldn't tell. I didn't know the hand was still up at City Hall. Okay, Mr. Bill Cotman.
So I just want to be clear that, especially with the last statement that was recently made about the charter schools, because my understanding is one of these charter schools don't even have a transportation policy. And so to see this large number, to say that they will agree to be paid or whatever, we need to look into that. And I'm not trying to differentiate, but Buffalo Public Schools is what we're trying to do here, and that's first and foremost, and I'm sure we all agree. And if in the process we can help other schools that we can, but I do not want this meeting not to paint a true picture in that we know from the pattern of what happens every year that once the weather turns foul, we lose bus drivers. So to try to paint a picture that we're not going to have a major problem or that this problem is not going to escalate in the very near future is not necessarily true. And I want to make sure that that's understood, okay? Because we know that some drivers they will drive in the morning based on previous reports to the board and will not show up in the afternoon. If there's a major storm, they will not show up, period. So we need to make sure that we're not painting a picture that's not true. Our worst scenario is what we want to always work back from, okay, and being transparent with our community. And I want to make sure we work the worst scenario and improve from there. And then we don't have a problem if we do the worst scenario. And so I'm concerned because I don't know how you're supposed to get the student ID numbers. Is there a mechanism for that? I'm not sure how that's supposed to happen, or is this just a done deal and we're just not going to do it? Okay, because I don't understand how you get the student ID numbers at this junction. I don't. That's
So
all
we're
I
gonna
have
have
to
to do
say.
it manually.
You're
We're
gonna
gonna
do
have to
what?
cross-reference. We're gonna have to get those student ID numbers manually. We'll cross-reference the student name with
Right.
our routing system.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you again. And due to the sake of time, we're going to move on with our presentation for educational support. We do have 2 more committee meetings scheduled for this evening, and we're going to try to get through those in a reasonable time, but we also want to make sure that we understand the importance of these next 2 topics. One is school visits, and the other one is our RFPQ process and the readings of it. So to begin, I would just like to read that for this November, on March 11th, 2021, President Joseph Biden signed into law the HR 1319 Act, a $1.9 trillion supplemental appropriations bill, commonly referred to as the American Rescue Act plan. On January 18, 2022, the U.S. Department of Education distributed the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, that's the ARP and ESSER funds, to every state of education here in the nation. As a result, the department contributed $122 billion of the ARP and ESSER funds to all 50 states, including the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. These funds were critical in helping our states and local districts safely keep schools open for in-person learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, including responding to the challenges arising from the Omicron variant. With the help of the ARP funds, about 96% of the K-12 public schools were open for full-time and was able to hold in-person instruction. The department also stressed the importance of a full-time and safe in-person learning and how federal funds can be used to achieve that goal. Additionally, for the 2021-22 school year, the administration distributed millions of new tests for each month to help schools remain safely open and implement screening testing and tests for state programs. The department also designated that a portion of the $122 billion in funding to be used by school districts to promote robust plans to help keep school buildings open, to utilize funds for staff recruitment and retention, also to help create funding for existing programs that would aid students and help the community thrive throughout the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Buffalo Public School District received $289 million in federal funding, in part for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund Plan, the ESSER, and the district presented this proposed plan for a spending of $175 million of the federal funding to help support students mentally and academically. The Buffalo Public School District submitted their plan included to reopen schools safely, making sure all buildings have a proper air quality and safe drinking water at a cost of $38 million. The upgrades to the district information technology and digital at a cost of $39 million, and helping student academic growth at a cost of $175 million. And also, this district provided students with support services, which is basically most of our presentation on tonight from the ESSER funds. The Buffalo Schools was one of the first districts in the state of New York to submit its plan to the state and see the positive impact of this infusion of federal support and how it's having directly influenced our schools and communities. Because the Buffalo School District recognizes that successful use of federal pandemic recovery funds requires input from the community, parents, educators, and other partners, the district followed the federal guidelines that required that all states and schools districts engage with a diverse range of community members as they develop their plans for spending the ARP ESSER funds. These communities included students, parents, and families, tribes, civil rights organizations, and disability rights organizations. The school and district administrators and educators and stakeholders representing the interests of the schools with disabilities, English language learners, children experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. We also have children who are incarcerated and undeserved students. The Buffalo School District has ever-changing needs, and this administration, under leadership of Dr. Tanja Williams, has performed a terrific task in allocating these federal funds towards critical issues such as labor shortages, expanding access to vaccinations, learning and adult learning, implement mitigation strategies, and making updates to school infrastructure and ventilation systems. Maintaining an effort and maintenance and quality provision by the ARP and ESSER in supporting students experiencing homelessness and the students with disabilities, among other topics. To finish this off, our students and staff have come from a state that we had previously removed ourselves and isolated from one another over a period of 1 year. We're in protective masks and clothing and suffering through the stresses of COVID-19 and dealing with stresses from civil rights and civil liberty movements. Also, our children and staff have been suffering through this identified and newly unidentified elements such as anxieties, which has left them to be unsure with abilities and lack confidence. And studies have shown that 25% of the population have had depression episodes, while 50% had reoccurring episodes of depression. The move to the end, we also looking for ways why the Educational Support Committee meeting works for our district, and also it is important tonight that we discuss some of the services that the Buffalo schools are now providing to our district and the efforts and strides that the district has made to ensure that every child, every family, every employee and stakeholder have access and receive the professional help that is needed. We are accomplishing this by fortifying our relationship with mental health organizations and establishing new relationships with our important community partners who have worked with our student population for decades, but may have not been established relationship with the district. So we will start this evening program by addressing the student support services and then looking into our RFP process to hire community partners, in which the search started in July in 2022. So right now, to present on behalf of school support visits, and we'll be talking about dealing with suspensions during that, is Dr. Sharon Brown, our Chief of Support Services Officer. Dr. Brown? First, we have Dr. Tanja Williams. Does she have any comments about the presentation? Then we'll go to Dr. Brown. Thank you.
Board Chairman, I think you've covered quite a bit of, what will be covered tonight as far as how our district has chosen to use some of our funds, some of the work that we're doing under the leadership of Chief Brown. a lot of what we're doing focuses on the wellness of our students, physical wellness, mental health wellness, social and emotional wellness. You know, already the department has put together an updated code of conduct. They have updated the compendium of supports that we have in schools, just as two examples, but you're going to hear more. In addition to that, under her leadership right now, we have our central registration department that is, you know, right in the deep trenches of ensuring that the importance of parents knowing about school opportunities for their children and registering them, because all of that plays also into the safety and wellness of our children. We want our children in schools that they really want to be in, are comfortable in, and can thrive in. And so what you're really going to hear about tonight, though, is how now they're taking it into another step. And the team is going out and supporting schools, looking at data. We had a very good data meeting this week, and we're not just looking at academic data, we're looking holistically at big pockets of data and seeing, you know, which schools do we need to support, not in I gotcha, not in a punitive way, in a supportive way. And so we are in the deep trenches of that. You're going to hear from Dr. Brown about what's happening in some of the school visits. You'll meet some of her staff. I can see them on the platform now. So I'll turn things over without further ado to you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And Mir, if you could put up the slide. So again, good evening, board members, Superintendent Williams, colleagues, and listening audience. I, along with the assistant superintendents for the Division of Student Support Services, Ornice Hill and Tina Jones, we really look forward to sharing how our division is supporting schools to help them to reduce suspensions and increase attendance as our students and adults continue to recover from the nation's COVID-19 and the racially motivated hate crime of May 14th. And Dr. Williams definitely shared a lot of what we're doing, and we'll just expound a little bit more. I'll start with providing some context. And so we definitely feel the impacts in our Buffalo community that has ultimately found its way into our schools. As you see from the Division of Student Support Services logo, our motto is making connections and building capacity. We realize the importance of making those connections, not only with our school and district colleagues, but community partners and parents who we work side by side with to positively impact the lives of students. Next slide, please, Amir. We always keep the education bargain at the forefront of our work. We speak with one voice, one vision, one mission that is aligned to Dr. Williams' district's, strategic plan. While the Division of Student Support Services, while we really do embrace the supports of all of the pathways that you see listed, we specifically focus on the sixth pathway, which is services for our neediest children and families in the ways that we offer our supports. Next slide, please. Well, our school support visits are grounded in Dr. Williams' 5 goals achieved by 2025, which she has definitely charged the entire district with. She's charged herself with, as well as the cabinet. And we support the whole school, whole community, whole child, known as the WISC approach, which really is embedded in these 5 goals that Dr. Williams established. We will continue to strive to meet the following goals: eliminate achievement and opportunity gaps, access to educational excellence and accelerated learning, prioritizing safety, security, and wellness, because we know that is so important to, number one, have that safety and security, and then amplifying all voices and cultivating trust and activate partnerships, because we know with the student support visits and the school visits, it's so important to have all 5 components in order to continuously build the relationships that we're doing. Next slide, please. So our objectives for this evening are to review organizational structures of supports, goals of school visits, supports, and monitoring next steps. Next slide, please. So you see our organizational chart here, and I know we have such a large district with several departments and offices. I thought it would be helpful just to share the structure of our Division of Student Support Services, because when we talk about school support visits, it's not just the visits that we see occurring within the four walls of the school, but there's also a lot of work that occurs before we even enter the schools. And so I'm going to start with, the fact that, as you see here at the top, that, in my role as the Chief of Student Support Services, I want to really make it clear that I don't do this work alone. I don't work in isolation. I truly have an amazing team that work with me to ensure that we meet our goals. And the two assistant superintendents directly assist me in leading this work with the assistance of the directors and their teams. And so we have basically two sides of the house. Ornice Hill's team consists of Valerie Torrance Williams. She's the temporary director of pupil personnel, or PPS, with the assistance of her hearing officers. They conduct long-term suspension requests. We know that our last resort is getting to that stage where we see that there's a long-term suspension. It really needs to be a situation that is extremely serious. And according to New York State Education Law 3214, the school principal has the authority to suspend a student from 1 to 5 days if it is in accordance with the code of conduct. When pupil personnel receives the long-term suspension request, and it is a request, for 6 or more days, the director will determine if the long-term suspension rises to that long term. And if it does, the hearing officer, who is the superintendent's designee, will schedule and conduct the hearing. If the long-term suspension is not aligned to the code of conduct, the long-term suspension is rejected. And something that we've done, and we've learned more about it during our, I'll call it a portion of listening tours and the code of conduct and having so many stakeholder meetings, and Ms. Hill will explain more about this. But when that long-term suspension is rejected, we don't just reject it. We make sure that we reach out to the principal. We also have a letter where we offer all of our supports that we have within our district and outside of our district, because again, we always want to make sure that we're supporting our students. Also, we have crisis prevention and intervention supports, and that is led by Director Andrea Sanders, who oversees, with the assistance of her supervisors and other team members, attendance, McKinney-Vento, alternate and medical leave instruction, crisis and response coordinators, and inter-high student council. And that's another very important team. We know that students who are missing a number of days of school and our McKinney-Vento, those are our most neediest students, and those students who need to be engaged in alternate instruction because they've been suspended, and certainly students who leave for medical leave purposes. So it's really important, and that team works very closely together, and our crisis and response coordinators, they're there to support schools. Every single student support team, which is comprised of the school counselor, a psychologist, and a social worker, they have all been trained in how to respond to crisis. Also they've received training with threat assessments, lethality assessments. And also we have a program evaluator who's pretty new to our division, and Dr. Dominguez, who works very closely with the wonderful data, the data dashboard that OSA created, that stores all of our district's data. Dr. Dominguez collects and analyzes the data. Before we even go to a school to support, it's really important that we look at the data and we constantly monitor the data. That helps to remove any type of emotions, opinions, not that we don't respect qualitative data, and because that's also important, but we really do focus on the numbers and disaggregating it. And she's very good at making sure that we have those data points, we talk about it as a team, and talk about our next steps. The other side of the house, Tina Jones, she supervises Director Mai Nguyen, and her supervisor, they oversee all of our MTSS coaches and other team members in the areas of comprehensive nursing services. We know we have nurses in all of our schools. When we're looking at suspension and attendance data, we also have to make sure when we're looking at not only the mental health of our students, but we're also looking at their physical health. We know that COVID-19 has had a horrible impact on the health and wellness. And we also have RSV and monkeypox and flu, and there's just so many other viruses that are around. So we always want to make sure that we have a strong comprehensive nursing services. Also, she supervises the Office of School Climate. That's where the MTSS coaches work out of. And also we have a sexual health education support office. And also we have the Office of Whole Child Wellness Supports. That is a strong focus on our school wellness teams. And this is something that we are really, really focusing on to make sure, as per the district's strategic alignment plan, we want to make sure that we not only have school wellness teams, but highly effective school wellness teams. So we're looking forward to our visit to one of the schools that has been identified as having a high functioning team. And so we're looking forward to the work around that. Also, we have Director Martha Younger, and she supervises and oversees all of the school counselors with her supervisor. And she has college and career readiness coordinators who support as well to ensure that our students are college and career ready. And also homeschooling is under her direction. And then finally, we have the Director Kelly Daniels and her supervisor. They oversee student placement and registration. And we know that school choice is absolutely critical. We want to always make sure that parents and students are aware of the offerings and the supports that we have. And we're also going to add a counselor to that team so they can continuously guide parents in the choices that they make. And we know that that can definitely impact a student's social, emotional, and academic well-being. And we not only collaborate within our division internally and cross-functionally, but we also meet with outside departments so that we can fully support schools. Next slide, please. The goals of the school visits are to support schools with data analysis. The division provides the schools with disaggregated data so that we can drill to the student level. This school year, all of our MTSS coaches and supervisors, they visited every single school. Even though we know some schools are, doing fantastic, we have a number of schools that have not suspended a student at all. However, we still want to be proactive because we always know there are outliers there. There's students and staff who need support. And additionally, we have a coaching tool tracker, which every time an MTSS coach or anyone goes into the building, it is tracked in this tracker. We also look at the disaggregated data so that we can drill down to the student level. We make sure that we're looking at office discipline referrals. A trend that we're beginning to see with the ODRs is that even though there may be several ODRs in the school, it's not transferring into a suspension, which in what we're hearing and seeing is that they are finding other restorative practices so that it doesn't result in a student missing school. We also look at the suspension data. We identify schools' implementation of Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports. Schools are basically a microcosm of what we have in the Division of Student Support Services. But we want to make sure that they are totally equipped. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of our motto is that and we're there to provide supplemental ongoing support. And so once we identify what supports they've already implemented, we see how we can enhance that and do it in a way that is even more targeted. Also, student support teams and school teams, we collaborate to identify a plan of action. And I say the collaboration because it's absolutely critical. We want to make sure that schools understand that that we all have a role to play in this, that we're here to support them. And also we have, with the student support services, we have also ensured that our team, I know that I went out as well as the 2 assistant superintendents, and we also had directors and supervisors for schools where we're seeing that they're trending a little higher with suspensions and the attendance is lowering. And so we really spent a lot of time with those schools so that we could really do a blitz. Next slide, please. Okay, so with supports. So as Dr. Williams mentioned, it all started with the revision of the Code of Conduct. We really spent a lot of time before the start of the summer speaking to all stakeholder groups, making sure that we heard their voice, we heard what it is that they needed. And we heard a lot about the Code of Conduct itself. They felt was a sound document with needing some revisions, but they also mentioned that the implementation of it, just making sure that it was implemented with fidelity. And so we met with those groups prior to the start of the school year. And it's really important because I see the Code of Conduct as the blueprint, it's the foundation, it is how we engage with all of our students and families. And it really started at the administrators retreat as well, as far as the professional development. And we didn't just meet with school administrators. We also met with district administrators. We wanted to make sure that every stakeholder had a copy and knew about the Code of Conduct, because even if you're not in the building, you're supporting the buildings, you're supporting the schools, which are ultimately supporting the students. And so we had the administrators retreat, we provided training and support. Also, we took them through vignettes where we provided scenarios with students and asked them what sort of support or what level of support would you provide to the students. Also, we continued this support in our principal meetings. The assistant superintendents provided an excellent professional development where they broke the participants off into groups, and they had a chance to really have some good discussions. And we're also seeing additional, we also provide individual supports. I can't tell you how many principals call us, how many assistant principals call us. Just today, principal called about a situation that happened in class today, and we talked through it. They really want a thought partner. The Code of Conduct and everything that we've been doing around this work and the work of the coaches and the administrators going into the building, working collectively with the ASLs, we're constantly keeping it at the forefront. And so they're thinking about their practices each and every day, because their goal is not to suspend. They want to keep the students in school. And also the student support visits, as I mentioned, we've really been working on making sure that we're going through all of those data points. Can I have the next slide, please? I'm sorry, can you click the compendium, please, Admir? And so Dr. Williams mentioned the compendium that we revised, and we had a diverse group of stakeholders, a central office helping us with this. And when we talk about supports, again, I want us to think outside the box. It's not, again, just going into the buildings, but we have to think about the supports that we have offered at all of the schools. So you see the first slide, the second one with the education bargain. And if you could just take us right to the table of contents. Okay, so let's just pick a school. Let's pick 30. So it's a hyperlink. You can just click school, let's say school 30. And if you just scroll down at Mirror, it shows you all of the supports that that particular school has. And so that's another part of our visits. Again, looking to see what supports are in the school. They also have mental health providers through Say Yes. And this is a way that we can see how we can meet with all of the different partners. When we met with one school, they mentioned about something that was occurring on January 14th. And they said that Best Self was going to present. And they said, but you know what, that's okay. We'll cancel them and have your team to come. I said, no, we really want to work with Best Self. So if it's okay with you, we're going to meet separately with them and even plan with your team so that we can have a robust professional development. And just as we tier and differentiate with our students, the same thing with staff. We want a tiered approach so that we can just, everyone can take a piece of this pie, this beautiful pie, and be able to spread it so that we can all support. Because there are a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 strategies, buddying up, student buddies. We're talking about ambassadors in each classroom to build that student voice so students will know their own classroom data. They don't need to know names, but they can know overall percentages and raw numbers. So you begin to say, let's talk about this, where they meet monthly, where they can meet monthly with their leadership teams and talk about these data. And then the last thing, Admir, if you would just take us to the table of contents, and Dr. Reynolds will go over this, but can you click the last section where it says vetted vendors? And so the nice thing about this is it talks about the future, because Dr. Reynolds and her team, they've gone through the RFPQ. So schools now can go to this section if you want to scroll down. They have all of the vendors that have been vetted. It explains here how you would be able to access that. And so, Admir, if you could take us out of this. And right now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hill and Mrs. Jones, who are going to share with you some additional supports that they've been offering.
Okay, good evening. I'm just going to follow up with some details about some of the things that Dr. Brown spoke about. So as she said, long-term suspension hearings are the responsibility of the Department of Pupil Personnel Services. So when principals submit a long-term suspension request, basically they're accepted for infractions that rise to a level 4 in the Code of Conduct. But if requests do not rise to that level, they are rejected, but they're rejected with supports. So for example, this school year, in September, I think it was, we rejected a long-term suspension request. Before I rejected, I called the principal, talked about, the reasons for the rejection and the supports that we could offer. So I helped out reaching out to the parent, the administrative staff, the SST, and then collaborated with the Department of Social, Emotional, and Wellness Supports. And the Office of School Climate, MTSS coaches went to the school and assisted with the restorative conference. In addition to the restorative conference, they also helped the staff with de-escalation strategies and assisted with bolstering the school's tier 1 and 2 supports, like restorative circles, school-wide expectations, etc. I also followed up with the parents, and actually today I looked before the meeting, and the student has actually not received another suspension since that September, and has only had 1 ODR since. So I feel like our supports actually, right from the start are making a difference. After we presented at the administrators retreat, started to get a lot of calls, and I presented with the Office of School Climate coaches at several faculty meetings and followed up based on principal's requests, and the team from the Office of School Climate has been assisting in those schools. Additionally, Mrs. Jones and I presented at the October principals meeting, and that has also generated quite a few support calls from principals. We're both kind of in constant communication with principals, offering supports and on a daily basis. Okay. Mrs. Jones?
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. So on the school counselor side of the house, our goal is to ensure that we can visit at least 10 to 15 schools per month between now and May of 2023. Our primarily focus is to support the counselors on attendance and suspensions. And what does that look like? The school counselors will be collaborating with the attendance teachers to find out what are the barriers for the students not coming to school, whether it be immunization or transportation or other things that are affecting the students to be in school. Our ultimate goal is to increase the attendance with all of our students being in the building. Then we look at a suspension data. Our students that are suspended, short-term and long-term, every counselor assigned to a school will be connecting with all the students while they're home. So if a student is home on suspension for 1 to 5 days, the counselor is going to make contact with that student to ensure that they are doing their academics, talking to them about their social emotional wellness, and to also come up with a prevention plan to ensure that they, when they return back to school, that they can stay in school and not have the same type of infractions that occurred prior to them being suspended from school. We have a group of staff members that are our MTSS coaches, which you've heard in the presentation, our coordinators, our college career readiness counselors, and with the supports and collaborations with all the departments, we are really diving into the data to make sure that the students that are suspended are supported while they're home and making sure when they come back, they don't have the same type of infractions and decrease it and get our babies back in school. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, you're on the next slide. No, I'm sorry. Can you back up? So everything that we just shared, we also want to make sure that you're aware that we are constantly monitoring, because we know the monitoring is absolutely critical. As I said earlier, we do have a coaching log, a tracker, where the social emotional learning department, as well as the counselors, crisis prevention and response team, they keep a log, and also the school visits. Next slide, please. And just to show you just very briefly, just a sample of the monitoring. And so as you can see here with the coaches, this shows you how the services are delivered and how much time is spent. So as you can see, professional development and coaching and planning preparation is absolutely critical. And they've gone to the schools to support for planning and preparation to also align their goals with their school plans. They've also provided classroom management, restorative circles. We work very closely with Erie County Restorative Justice, and they also work directly with 5 schools. And what we've done is we've merged our supports to ensure that we're not sending mixed messages. We know that Erie County, they do a wonderful job with restorative practices as well. And we want to make sure that our training is absolutely aligned. So they will be actually attending some of our sessions that we're offering to the teachers and to the faculty and staff, all of the administrators, and we're going to start moving to teacher aides and assistants. Next slide, please. And this, again, disaggregates it a lot more. It talks about tier 1, tier 2 interventions. When you actually see the coaching log, you can see what type of intervention that is. It has the name of the individual and the role that they have in the building, because again, we're really trying to track and drill directly to the students' names. And something that I don't know if I shared, I was talking about the ODRs and how we're looking at them, but also we're looking at how we can support the staff as well. Staff who are struggling, staff who are writing up a lot of ODRs, and it's actually very compelling when sometimes it's within junior high and you see that maybe there's a staff member that may be having some challenges. We're here to constantly support. And also we offer that collective care cafe for the adults, because as I said earlier, it's not just the students who are experiencing the impacts of COVID and everything that we've been going through, the adults as well. So we offer that. So this is just an example. And then also our department, they help support the CLRI initiatives and the training. Next slide, please. And then just finally, the next steps. I know that Ms. Hill, she's going to be presenting at the BPS Leadership Academy. They asked for the newcomers and those who are trying to go higher into leadership, into administration. they would like to receive a training in the code of conduct. And so we're looking forward to that because we think it's so important that they continue to look at it through lens at all different levels. Professional development for teachers and administrators, we're going to continuously dig deeper with that. As I said earlier, go with a tiered approach. When a teacher has reached a certain level, then they can support in other ways as well. And also planning phases of suspension prevention program. We have a meeting on Monday with Parent Congress and other partners to see how we can create a program to prevent suspensions. And then again, I mentioned the school wellness team visits. We're looking forward to visiting the school that is identified as being a high functioning school wellness team. Next slide, final slide. And then again, together we achieve more. Again, we are making connections and building capacity, and we're doing this work together to benefit our students. Thank you. And what questions do you have?
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Brown, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing. Also, Tina Jones and Ornice Hill. I know that that your work is tireless, and that you guys are working very hard just to help our children, help our school districts, and our principals, teachers, and families. So right now, I'm gonna I'm going to go across the screen and call out board members to see if they have any questions so far about the presentation or any suggestions. So the first person on my screen is Dr. Kathy Adams Brown. I'll start with you.
Good evening. Thank you for such a robust conversation. I didn't realize the complicated array of services that it involved. I don't have any questions at this point, but I see that I like the fact that, these services are in line with what other committees and sessions do, such as student achievement. So I'm pleased to know that everything is in lining with each other. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Evans Brown. Next we have up is Jennifer McCosey.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. I also don't have any questions. I feel like the material was so, what can you question? It's right there for you. The only thing that I ask is that the reminders to folks in order to access this, how to access it is plentiful on our social media. These are all questions that I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure other board members receive, especially like the breakdown of the schools, what's available in every school. Every now and then is, oh, did you know you can access this through this? That type of consistent messaging, so we can refer that as board members, be on the same page with you, and then also be able to reflect and tell folks where to go. That's really all I can say. Fantastic presentation, and thank you so much for the breakdown.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. McCosey. Next person we have is Larry Scott. Are you available?
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. I don't have any questions either. Similar to my two other colleagues that spoke, commend you all on the comprehensive presentation and really just giving us the nuts and bolts of what student support services provides from the district level on into the schools. I think many people, especially our critics, our top critics, don't fully understand all of the work, all of the programming, varied programming that supports and services that go into trying to be preventative, trying to be restorative on a daily basis. And I almost wish, we had all of our media, the Buffalo News editorial board, tuning in right now to hear all of the efforts that are made on behalf of the district and our schools to help students and our families and to prevent suspensions as much as possible, that we are not in any way doing nothing but handing out suspensions when there's problem behavior that occurs. So thank you, Dr. Brown, Ms. Jones, and Ms. Hill for the presentation and all the information and all the work you do on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next, in fairness, we'll go to Paulette Woods, and then we'll go straight into City Hall. Mrs. Woods?
I appreciate the tremendous efforts at reducing suspensions, because that is something that is extremely serious and the community is monitoring. I appreciate the efforts on increasing restorative justice. I missed some of your presentation. Someone came to my home, so I didn't know if you said that there were additional staff added to the restorative justice staff, because I understood there wasn't that a significant number. So did you say something about there were additional staff members dedicated to restorative justice so that it could be rolled out more comprehensively at different schools? Okay, go ahead.
I apologize. So I did say that we've partnered with Erie County Restorative Justice, and they have basically adopted and worked, and they're working with 5 schools. So we're building our team together to expand the services and supports that we're offering district-wide.
So that gives us additional staff, and I thought we were previously working with 5 schools, 3 years ago? So I'm not.
The good thing about it is I know this year she's added another school, and so the schools can actually change based on the data. And so what we're seeing is definite improvements, and so it goes to different levels and phases within a school, and it depends on the school's culture. Some schools are already restorative schools. They do these practices every day. So what we're really trying to do is identify where schools currently are and how we can take them to the next level in a very concentrated, significant, tiered level, targeted support. So that's what we're really working on this year.
That's a wonderful objective. I'd love to see a schedule for how it's going to be rolled out so that it affects all, so we can one day say all schools have the program. And did you say again did you say there's an additional staff person, because staff, resources, materials is what expands programs? So again, did I hear?
We have increased our counselors. We don't have any additional staff added to our social, emotional, and wellness, but we have partnered with Erie County Restorative, which they have staff, but we haven't increased with social, emotional wellness. But counselors, yes, we have increased with our counselors.
Okay. Did I miss? I thought this was the response when I read the agenda. I thought this was the response to the RFQ, which the introduction was for our American Rescue Act monies and the ESSER monies. So am I mistaken? I thought we were going to get a presentation on the list of people, community groups that had responded and sent in requests for contracts to the RFQ, which ones were selected and which ones might have been rejected. I thought that was the presentation we were going to receive.
So Mrs. Woods, what I would do is we refer that to the next meeting, but that's supposed to be presented right after we present here with this segment.
Well, if the information is available, we've been asking for months for that information, because we do have groups asking, was my submission received? Was it reviewed? If it was it accepted or was it rejected, and what was the reason? So I'm looking for the data, and if the data was supposed to be presented, which is what I understood when I read the committee, if the data is prepared and available, I'd like to receive a hard copy, an email of whatever the presentation could be, and you can postpone a presentation later, but I would like to receive the data we've been requesting because we have to be transparent and respond to the community's requests. So that is my request.
Thank you, Mrs.
We will
Ward.
share that data with you. Board Member Woods, I see that Dr. Reynolds is shaking her head yes.
Right now, I'll email it now.
Okay, let's finish this committee meeting, and then we can move on to the next meeting and see where we'll go with that tonight. I know that we're almost 42 minutes over time right now, but
I understand that, but I'm not asking you to extend anything. I'm just saying, send me the information. I don't need a presentation. I just need the data. I can read it for myself.
Okay, let's reflect with the board's opinion about moving that forward, possibly to next month, or just having a quick review tonight, just to enhance the time, because we do have another committee to have to present also. So I am very much interested in that data too, and I did call for this meeting to be presented tonight, but due to the lack of time right now, I think that we're going to be about almost hour and a half to hour 45 minutes over, and I sort of want to make sure that we get the right time to present this very important data. So we still have to go to City Hall, and we have Mrs. Sharon Belton-Codman and President Lou Pasucci.
Do you want me to go first? You go first. All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. I truly appreciate all the work that you've done to try and reduce suspensions. But I have a few questions, and some of my questions are about overall process, but also about short-term suspensions, because that seems to be where I get a lot of calls as well. First question, how are parents notified when it comes to a suspension? Because I'm under the impression that that a letter needs to be sent, and oftentimes I'll get the, I didn't know my child was suspended. I didn't receive the letter until after the suspension was well in progress or almost over, or they sent the child to school when the child was suspended, then they had to get called from work because there wasn't a communication. I was just wondering if you could tell everyone who's watching, and for the edification of my fellow board members, just, do we still have to send a letter? Can we do a text or email? I know the New York State courts and others have been migrating to that electronic communication.
Yes, thank you for the question. So in relation to the short-term suspension, the principals, they do have to send a letter. It's a letter that is either express delivery or it is dropped off or personally delivered, and the law says or equivalent means. And so that letter is supposed to be given the day that the child is deemed as suspended, which goes into effect the next day. The parent does have a right to contact the principal and request a conference in which witnesses can be there that they need to question, unless a principal deems that it is unsafe for that child. But yes, the letter does have to be sent out. And when you say about texting, again, I know we have legal on the call. We've asked about perhaps an email as the equivalent. The law doesn't state what equivalent means.
So the only reason I ask that is that you can file court papers electronically, and you get an electronic receipt, and they're notified, and it's just quicker, easier. Just because I have heard that about that delay, that sometimes even express mail can be a few days, and a lot of parents that are that are truly engaged in their children and their education want to be notified like ASAP. And I know there's informal communication that oftentimes goes on between the principal and the student beforehand and the parents, but if that's something that we need to update, then maybe we need to take a look at that and kind of update our policies to align with the reality of what's happening right now.
Yes, and if I could add one more piece, and yes, it is included in our code of conduct and all of our information that goes out. Also, they can make a phone call as well. That is not a substitute for the actual written notification, but that's an additional, when at all possible, they should call the parent as well to let them know that this letter, they should be receiving it within 24 hours. But yes, we can continuously keep that communication, and we constantly meet with the principal, so we will share that as well.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your efforts. The other thing about the conference, particularly short-term suspensions, I will say that I've heard from numerous parents where the conference is scheduled for 5 days out. So what is the point of having a conference if for the short-term suspension it's already completed? So my child gets 5 days off, and I'm going to schedule the conference next week after the 5 days has already been transpired, or already has commenced, I should say. So the conference really doesn't carry weight because the time has already elapsed. The child's already served the suspension. So sometimes parents have represented that really is kind of a red herring, a lost leader. I can request, and I get a request to have it, but the process takes too long, and that the suspension has already been completed before I can get a date for a hearing on the calendar.
So yes, so thank you for sharing that. So the suspension letter that they should receive says on there that the conference should occur by 10 a.m. the next day unless it's mutually agreed for a later time. And so if that's happening, I really do encourage, because something else that we're really working on is making sure we keep the lines of communication open, and to please call the school. And if they can't reach the school, certainly call the pupil personnel office or Niece Hill, myself, Tina Jones, and we will reach out to the parent to try to make that connection with the school. Also the Associate of School Leadership, because we don't want anyone to suffer in silence, and we want to know if there's a breakdown. Because also, even though the principal is the only authority that can do a short-term suspension, oftentimes, it's delegated to send out that letter, so they may not even be aware. So just to keep the lines of communication, I also want to stress that if we could please make that phone call so we can get it addressed immediately, because that is a concern.
I hear you, Dr. Brown, but oftentimes what happens is I know that there'll be mitigating factors where the parent or the guardian will, because of the relationship with the principal, might request somebody else to be there as well, and oftentimes that 10 a.m. gets pushed back, and that seems to be kind of the communication I've received from parents, like, hey, I wanted to have somebody else there because of the relationship with the principal or the vice principal, and we really want to have someone from central office or whoever it may be. And that's when things hit the skids, that 10 a.m. becomes a week from 10 a.m. and parents become a little concerned. Those have been the concerns. Okay. Next thing I want to ask about is how quickly do the students pivot to a remote learning status? Is there any delay? So if I'm suspended, my suspension starts next day, is this child automatically put on remote learning or a remote learning type of instruction? What type of instruction are they receiving at home now when they are on a short-term suspension?
Yes. So the letter that the parents receive, it states that the school will arrange their alternate instruction. The law states that definitely by the third, it should be immediately, but definitely by the third day. Our goal is to make sure that they receive it immediately. The schools, if there's any concern about them not receiving their remote, because typically it's through Schoology and they can access it right then and there, but they have to find is an after-school teacher. So I know some schools have had a challenge with trying to secure after-school teachers, but we always ask them to contact Andrea Sanders, and what we'll try to do is see about another teacher at another school who can include that student in their virtual group. But it should happen definitely no later than the third day.
Right. It's that delay that I sometimes get the calls about as well. And I swear this will be my last question. But it's one of the topics I do receive calls from various people all around the city. You mentioned the support at home, and that I'm great. I'm so happy to hear that, because that was the one thing that we've always stressed, that if I suspend a student, and the student's off, oftentimes not only are they academically at a disadvantage, they don't have the support systems in place so they can successfully like re-enter the classroom. So I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on the support that at home and how it happens, and just so people that are watching and for my fellow board members, what that looks like so that we know that the students have those types of support so they can return successfully to the classroom.
Yes, so something that we were thinking about, and this happened at the end of last school year, and as we're constantly just trying to see how can we better support our students, we thought about the fact that students who are out on suspension, they get the alternate instruction, but are they really getting their social emotional needs met? And so that is why we said that the counselors, we're asking the counselors to contact, because now something that we learned from COVID is that we can do these virtual platforms. Why can't we engage the students virtually during the day? A lot of them are already involved in check-in, check-out. They have SAG groups, so they can continue that. And just today when we were debriefing, my team and I, it was a parent that told one of the assistant superintendents that, yes, the counselor came by today to check on my child. It was like, we were so excited that what we've actually asked them to do, we see that is actually happening. So that support also, they get support. Sometimes they may be already connected with a mental health provider. That mental health provider, that's why communication is absolutely critical, making sure that mental health provider in that school knows that that child is suspended. I can have total access to that student even when I'm not in school. Sometimes some of our mental health clinics, because of their certification, they can only be there for 2 days, but they do clinic work on the other days. There's no reason. We have mobile clinics too. They can go to the home and support the students. So that's the sort of wraparound services that we're trying to provide and support often, so that we don't see a student suspended again, that they're getting those supports that they need.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes my questions. Ms. Kottman, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I would like to know, what does the program evaluator do, and when can we see that, what the impact of that work? I'm looking at your org chart. What does the program evaluator do?
So our program evaluator, she provides data for us. She disaggregates the data. She's actually also helped to write grants. When she sees the data, we use the data to drive all of our professional development. We meet within teams, and in the teams meetings that we have, the data that she's providing, we're trying to get to the point where the coaching tracking log that we're seeing, we want her to be able to provide us with data views and trends. Like she provides trend reports that will tell us the schools, the disaggregated data, which students are experiencing difficulty, and the trend. Are we seeing this across the board? Is this the first year that student has done that, or is it many years? And also with that program evaluator to really be able to see if what we're doing, if it's working. We're moving now towards the program evaluation, even with alternate instruction. This is something that we want to try this year, is to see the satisfaction of the services that are offered for our students after school for alternate instruction. Is it working? Did you feel as though your student learned what he or she needed to learn? So those are some of the roles of that program evaluator.
So does the evaluator deal with any of the after-school programs or supports that are being provided, or no?
What she does is she can pull data from that, and she's more than willing to support in any way possible. But she pulls data so that we know, how do we deploy our student support staff to support. Like I'm looking at a report that she sent me. It's listed in terms of what are students, how many students we have, what their status is when it comes to attendance and suspension, what programs they're in. We're again taking it to a whole nother level. She's working with student placement and registration. They're working on a project in terms of school choice to be able to have some stakeholder meeting groups, because we're looking at the different 5 choices, just to be able to present the Board of Education. Actually, first is present to Dr. Williams, but those are some of the things that we're doing. We're also going to be having our DSEP meetings, our stakeholder meetings. She collects those data points in order to inform if what we're doing, if it's working.
Okay, so on this art chart, you do not have her connected to she sits alone, and that's the reason for this question. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you mean.
See what I'm saying? And so if she is connecting with or doing this, monitoring this, there should be a line connecting her to these things. Okay, and so that's the reason why I asked, because she's sitting out there by herself. So, you know, what is she assessing? And that's the reason. Had there been a line connecting that, and I guess that's what threw me off, because it's like she sits there all by herself and so I need to see that they're relating. The other piece is that, does the crises prevention and interventions supports work on the other side as well, with the social emotional wellness supports and the guidance and things like that? Okay, so then there needs
Absolutely.
to be then we need to adjust this org chart to reflect that. That's my suggestion. That's all.
No, that's no problem. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you.
Yeah, that's my only suggestion. I just think that if you don't have it on the org chart connected like that, we can't see it work. So thank you. I appreciate the
fault. Oh, sorry.
No, it's nobody's fault. It's just how things happen. But the other thing is, my concern is similar to what Mr. Pritchard. I'm curious to know if you have the system, a system set up where when student number 456 gets suspended, that there is a tracking attached to it, that somebody put in there, because I have no understanding why a child is leaving school without his letter. I have no understanding. I understand that we should be mailing a letter, but there should be letters automatically in the system that a principal can generate and give that child in an envelope to take home. And we would have to, again, follow it up and by mailing it. But there, in my opinion, there should be never a situation where a child is leaving a building without a letter, okay? That way the child not to come back to school the next day. And so for someone who has worked systems over the years, I know that if we pre-print the letters, all you have to do is add the child's name, add the offense or whatever, and the child leaves out of there before they're excused from school with the letter. And it's clear, everything is there. No one could say you didn't get it because it was handed to your child. Now, if you threw it away or whatever, but you cannot say that this. So in that chart, it would say a child 4567 letter was given upon dismissal or release, okay, or whatever. Then the next letter was mailed out. We would have a timeline in place, because what people are saying to me is that they don't get the letter for a long time. And so if they're given a letter at suspension or at the time they're at home, we shouldn't have that conversation anymore. So that's just a recommendation that I sort of suggest that you think about implementing, so that we can stop this conversation about parents not being informed and didn't know that their child. And then I would think that we would follow up with an additional call in regards to that, to say that your child has been sent home today with a letter and he is not to return. I'm not sure what the clerk's responsibility is, but that seems like that would be a responsibility of the clerk to make sure that this child does not come back to school tomorrow. So I'm just trying to make sure that we can stop some of these complaints, because we all receive these calls. We all receive them. And if we're all receive to think about doing things differently to make sure we don't get them. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Belton-Cotman. And okay, thank you, Mrs. Belton-Cotman. And I would just like to say this is a wonderful job, Dr. Brown, Mrs. Hill, and Mrs. Jones. And I know that Mrs. Hill, for the last couple of years, reported that from the building she was previously at, they used restorative justice practices and actually turned that program around over there. So I know that with her understanding restorative justice practice and how it can be placed into a building or a school, or maybe into a school that wasn't practicing it, that we can now universally use restorative justice practices and see greater outcomes, for our children, our staff, and relationship with the parents. Just a quick reflection about the letters. A lot of times you can see the letters out on the school lawn after school. The children don't take them home. You can find that another word that's being thrown out because the children do not take the letters home. When I was younger, got suspended many times, fighting all the time. It's the environment and things we had to do, but we got suspended. We never took letters home. Or the common thing with kids would do here, we get home before the phone ring, and so that their parents can't answer the phone. Now we have cell phones and everything, but we have to find better ways of reaching out to the parents. And is it that our kids are being suspended without notification from their parents? Are they being sent home early, and the parents are not notified? Could you please explain that to me?
I would say that in most all of our cases, and this is really something that falls more under our chief of school leadership, because it's something that principals are really responsible for, making sure that those letters, we do have a system in place where we have standardized letters that are created. And so it's just a matter of inputting a student's name and what they did and how long they're going to be out of school and having that printed out and given to them. So the piece that's additional to that I heard Board Member Kottman saying is the tracking of it and making sure that there's some documentation to show, was the letter given out? Was the letter mailed? Was there a phone call? That would be a piece. But we certainly do have a system in place where most all of our students, I would veer to say 99.9% of our students that receive an out-of-school suspension do receive a letter to take home.
Okay, but we can't be certain that the letter is given to the parent once it's given to a child who's being suspended. A child being suspended may be suffering from different elements, as we discussed earlier, maybe elements from depression from the COVID, and returning back to in-person classroom and dealing with other kids who may be going through different type of other anxieties. So is there another system that we can try to use, or is it something that the district has been practicing other than the letter to contact the parent and the phone call?
So the expectation is the phone call. That is the expectation. However, what I hear from principals is that in certain cases, some numbers are blocked. 816 numbers are blocked, and they're not able to get through in some cases. Numbers do change, but in most all cases, the expectation is that a parent will know if their child has received an out-of-school suspension, whether it is through writing or a phone call. Parents need to know if I'm sending a child home with the expectation that they're not coming back the next day, that they have been suspended and what they have been suspended for. So I'm hearing that the board is hearing a lot of those concerns. I'm not hearing those concerns that parents don't know. Parents don't always agree with the suspensions that are happening, but I'm not hearing the concerns that I'm hearing tonight, that lots of parents are saying that they're not being informed that their children are suspended. So if that's the case, then that's something that we'll address in our upcoming PAC meeting with our principal leaders to make sure that that is still happening.
Okay, thank you. I do have just a couple of questions. Tonight, we didn't give any numbers in our short-term suspensions and long-term suspensions and specifically with our buildings. But we can, but we know that we can also go onto the website and look at those physically ourselves. So we make sure that the parents get that information, and also our ODRs, the numbers that we receive per building, is also on the website also, buffalopublicschools.org. Our restorative practices was speaking of earlier. Are they being mandated in all our buildings now? Is it universally being mandated for all our principals to use restorative justice practices within the district?
The code of conduct.
Yes, the expectation is that all.
Yes, the code of conduct, the board has approved our code of conduct, and so there's progressive discipline that's happening from level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So yes, I mean, we're continuing to do the trainings for restorative practice to continue to enhance but that is the expectation, that all discipline that's happening with children is progressive discipline. And it always starts out restoratively and, wherever possible, unless it's something that's severe, at a level 1. And even when students come back to school, there's the opportunity for a restorative meeting to welcome them back into the school.
Okay, thank you. One of the big things I know that we can help use to alleviate suspensions is our community programs and programs. We look at like the Breaking Barriers program, the MBK program. We have a couple of programs aimed towards our females in the Buffalo schools. And I'm looking at student voice, and I'm looking at the Inner High Student Council on your chart. When does student voice play a part in help disseminating the factors that our children is dealing with? And what grade level are we practicing using student voice so they can be more reflective about things that they're going through?
And I think I heard your question, Board Member Hurd, you were breaking up a little bit, but yes, we do have our Inter-High Student Council, and please let me know if I didn't answer, if I'm not answering your question. So we are focusing on elevating that student voice. And even with, again, student ambassadors, I think I heard you say what grade level. For Inter-High is obviously the high school, but we are encouraging schools to include student voice at every level, at every grade. I mean, definitely minimally, I would say even second grade, third grade. I mean, just to begin with that whole student leadership piece. And so with our student council, they're really having meetings talking about how they can make sure that they're delivering that message and to be able to do that across the schools. So that's something with Andrea Sanders' work that they're working on in terms of making sure that voice is elevated, because we spend a lot of time planning for our students and they can just tell us. We even, I know that Dr. Dominguez worked with the Inter-High students, so I'm asking them questions about the compendium and our whole asset mapping. Part of that asset mapping is student voice, because we want to know what kind of partners do they want in the building, because that will be absolutely critical for them as we're planning for them for during the school day, after school. And they were having very rich discussions. So she's in the process of preparing that report right now. So to answer your question,
okay.
student level, it's really at the building level if they determine even at the lower grades, second and third grade.
Okay, I just want to, if you can, I would like to walk through for the next presentation, the educational support, that we can look more into student voice and see what that details, per program. So if it's a child in the third grade or fourth grade or fifth grade, how many hours or how many minutes throughout the day or the week are being attributed towards student voice, and so they can reflect things that's happening to them so that they can have an outlet. Also, in your chart, I didn't see anything about parental engagement, or what are we doing working with the chief of student support with parental engagement. I didn't see anything like that was presented.
Okay. Yeah, so I thank you for that. Definitely can prepare that for you for the student voice and parent engagement I was mentioning, and the steps that we're doing with Parent Congress, and we are going to create a work session group for student suspension prevention program and our school wellness team visits, which involves Parent Congress, community health workers. So we are, yes, parental voice is absolutely critical, but thank you for that. And we'll make sure we have some information about that.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm not going to hold you any longer. I have a slew of questions, but I'll call you and we can talk one-on-one and see where we're at. I know that we're way over time. We're over hour over time. So I just want to ask the board and Larry Scott to see if it's okay if we can move our agenda topic for the RFPQ to next month, or if you want to do we can also ask if we can do a quick overview of the RFPQ process, because just like Paulette Woods, myself, I have worked with a lot of people in this RFPQ process and then getting their paperwork in and filling out the application. and also see if we can get the list of people who presented the, who actually put an application for the RFPs and RFPQs, and who were selected. So that process, that's very important because we see tons of phone calls and a lot of community input about, how was the process done, how was it disseminated, and was there actually interviews or anything like that in the process, and how that process is going to move forward. So I will ask Dr. Ramona Reynolds and the board if it's okay, and Larry Scott, if we can do a quick overview today and just move the presentation to a later date, if possible, because of time restraints.
Mr. Hurd, thank you for including me. I just wanted to let you know that I had intentions of having a presentation and update from central registration for the next meeting, and I thought it was timely with us before we enter the spring and parents being anxious to hear about placements.
Okay, so any more reflection from the board? We can do a quick overview of the program. Dr. Reynolds, I don't seem like we have a time slot for next month, so we can do a quick overview of what's taking place, and so our community can have a reflection about where they stand in this process.
One other suggestion though, Mr. Hurd, unless you want to do it December and then we do central registration in January.
It can be, we have an announcement coming up for January, so it'll have to be next month about new registration dates for input into the RFPQs. So that the announcement actually had to happen during your board meeting, unless we can just take a moment to announce.
What do you mean an announcement?
I asked Dr. Ramona Reynolds and Dr. Tanja Williams to reflect on that.
Board member Hurd, it's whatever the superintendent and the board desires. My update itself is very brief. I would surmise that you would have questions, but my update really will take just a couple minutes.
Okay, great.
And then I did also email the board the information that board member Wood requested. So am I hearing that we're going to take 2 minutes for me to provide a brief overview?
You can take a few minutes, please.
Okay. Admir, do you want to share the slide? And thank you for an opportunity. I know it's been a really long meeting. So thank you, Board Member Hurd and Superintendent Williams. Please advance the slide. You could provide a quick reminder regarding the intent of the RFPQ. Remember, this RFPQ is the BPS Student and Family Supplemental Programs and Services. And the reason why we created this is because we really wanted to provide an infrastructure that enables and increases equity, access, and opportunity for organizations, particularly our grassroots community-based organizations. We know that historically, many of our grassroots organizations didn't know. They didn't know that they had the opportunity to respond to the various requests for proposals that our district regularly releases. Advance, please. And so these have been the RFPQ processes. We conducted various virtual informational meetings on July 13th, 14th, and 19th. Board Member Hurd, as well as many of our board members, participated in those. We had over 110 interested participants. And we really, I had an opportunity to work closely with former CFO Jeff Pritchard, as well as former Director of Purchase Rick Fenton. And during these informational meetings, we provided information to potential vendors. We shared with them how to respond to an RFP. What is an RFP? How do you register for an RFP? How do you register for bonfire? So I think that these were really effective meetings, and we had a chance to really handhold and walk our interested parties step by step through the formats. The RFPQ was released on July 4th. You'll recall that I indicated once we establish the infrastructure that the RFPQ will be released twice per year. The first date was July 4th. The second date will be that first Monday back from winter break. So the very next time that we post it will be Monday, January 9th. We extended the deadline 1 week. And so that RFPQ that posted on July 4th, it closed on August 12th. We received, this says 54 proposals. We actually received 54 proposals. And I am told that that is the second highest number of proposals that our district has ever received for an RFP. Of the 54, 45 of the organizations met the minimal threshold, which means that they are now approved vendors and they can be considered for potential contracts. The approved vendors, Dr. Brown mentioned the BPS compendium that her division coordinated. The Office of Parent and Family Engagement, as well as other stakeholders, worked in partnership with them. So, you know, we won't click on the link right now, but if you want to take a look at all 45 approved vendors, you go to page 496 in the compendium. So it's 496 through 502. That compendium, I believe Dr. Brown mentioned this as well, it has been shared district-wide. We can continue and will continue to share it because that compendium is a living, breathing document. So as of today, we have 45 approved vendors. You know, when we repost the RFPQ on January 9th, I anticipate that we will be adding additional vendors to the compendium. And so we've gotten the compendium into the hands of our district and school leaders. They now have an opportunity to consider the gaps of their buildings, to take a look at their school improvement plans. Our department leaders, division leaders have an opportunity to do the next thing. Dr. Brown mentioned, and I emailed it to you as well, if you take a look at the compendium, you're going to see active links. So within the compendium itself, you'll see a concise description of what the organization offers. But then if you click on the far right, you'll be able to read the actual proposal, the narrative and the scope of work that they're proposing. And so if there is a school leader, a department leader, a division leader who, based upon the needs of the department or the school, see an organization that they're interested in offering the services or the programs within their schools, the next step is for them to reach out to the purchase department, and the purchase department corresponds directly with that organization so that they can negotiate contract costs with the vendors. Advance, please. And so where are we to date in terms of programming? And so we currently have 8 schools that are under programming contracts. Pending board approval next week, Wednesday, assuming that the board approves board recommendations, we will have an additional 10 schools that will enter into contracts and will have programming in their schools to support their students and their families. So that is, advance the slide, I think that's it. So that's a really quick overview. I'm hoping that you all will, you know, take an opportunity to dig in, and you want to see, you know, the type of programs and services that the organizations have to offer. You'll see a wide range. You have organizations who are offering mentoring and mental health services, social emotional supports, financial literacy, arts advocacy, empowerment, homework help, intergenerational parenting skills. So it goes on and on. So we don't see, just because this was one of the concerns that we had, that it was the same organizations offering the same thing. There's a wide range of programming options for our leaders to choose from. So that's the quick overview.
Dr. Reynolds, thank you for your overview. I apologize due to time restraints because I know you put so much time and effort into this. over since July, and we took time and worked with many community vendors, filling applications out with this process. Stayed up late at night to midnight sometimes working with vendors. So we want to make sure we have all the opportunities, to give more access to our children and kids. I'm going to go ahead and first of all let Dr. Chandra will give reflections, and I'm going to open it up for any board members if they have any questions.
Thank you.
I will defer to board members that may have questions. I think it was a comprehensive, quick, good overview that Dr. Reynolds gave. And so in lieu of time, I will defer to board members that may have questions.
I have a question for Paulette Woods. Ms. Woods.
I want to say to Dr. Ramona Williams, you have consistently worked with me to reach out to the community, to work with minority vendors, and to try to get the community more involved. I respect your efforts. I thank you for answering the questions that the community is asking us and giving us the ability to be able to look and say, okay, you said you sent this. If I don't see it on this list, either it got lost in the mail, the dog ate your homework. I just needed to be able to answer the question. So I thank you for this brief report. I will print out your 500-page compendium so that I can start answering the questions, because that's all I'm saying. Information, transparency, communication, and coordination gets the job done. So I applaud you. Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Woods. I have a question from Larry Scott. Mr. Scott?
Not a question, just letting Dr. Reynolds know that excellent work. I know last year throughout the pandemic, we really had to kind of cut off our partnership with many organizations simply because we couldn't have folks in our schools. And I was hearing a lot about how that needed to be restored. We had, I think, several conversations, email dialogue about bringing back these important community-based organizations. And I commend you on setting up such an open and process, educating and informing our community-based organizations on how they could apply. And I think the record number that you shared is evidence that your process was accessible and effective. So thank you. And the documents too that I've just reviewed are really impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Larry Scott. And we do have a hand raised in City Hall.
Thank you, Chairperson Hurd. Just two quick questions for Dr. Reynolds. First of all, I'll echo my thank you for all your efforts. 502 pages it is a phone book of a document when people used to have phone books. So with respect to the 8 schools currently under programming contracts, are these new schools since we put out the RFQP, or were these schools that were previously working with local vendors?
Those are great questions. Can I just do this though, because I certainly don't want to take credit away from the Division of Student Support Services. So 500 of the 505 pages were developed by the Division of Student Support Services. So just the last handful of pages in that compendium is the work of the Office of Parent and Family Engagement. Great question. In most instances, these are continuations from programs that were offered last year. So what we've been able to do to date is to respond to the requests of school leaders. And I am happy to say that for the school leaders who have emailed and reached out to request the programming in their schools, we have been able to make that happen. And so again, you all will be, my hope is approving a few board recommendations next week so that we can actually get them placed.
Okay.
And there are others also. I'll say, for example, there is one school that is interested in a rocketry program. And so you'll see that Buffalo State College is offering a STEM rocketry program. And so there's a school that's interested in that. So there are still some that are in the developmental stages right now.
Okay.
But it will be
So-
ongoing.
Thank you. Thank you for the kudos to the people that also worked on the report. I always appreciate that. With respect to your second bullet point, pending approval into new programming contracts for 10 schools. So will that bring us to 10 in total or 18 in total?
It will
In terms
bring
of
us
schools.
to, it would bring us to 18.
Okay, all right, that's what, thank you very much.
10. She said 8 were already in process.
Right, but 8 plus 10 is 18.
Right.
So these are 10 new. Ms. Cotman, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. So, question, because did you notify the people who were not successful? And did you provide them feedback?
I personally didn't. An email went out from the purchase department. And I know for sure to those who met the threshold, I believe, I'm not sure if acting CFO is on the call. I believe that those who did not meet the threshold also received an email correspondence.
Was there any feedback in the correspondence is what I'm asking, because people took their time to reach out to say to Buffalo Public Schools, we want to help you with your children population. And I ran into a lady yesterday in this grocery store, and she said that she did not know why her proposal was not accepted. And so I think there's a responsibility and onus on us to give people feedback when they take the time to fill out that form. And that's only fair, so that we can expand. My other question on that is that how will we pay these people? We know that most of these vendors are small vendors and cannot carry and wait 6 and 7 months to get paid. So are we going to make sure that there's a mechanism in place, and maybe it needs to come under finance and ops, to make sure that these people are paid so that they can keep these programs moving forward? Now, if you're talking Buff State, that's a different scenario. But if you're talking a small person who has 1 or 2 employees or 3 employees, that's something different. I think we need to look at that. We've had that conversation before at the board, and I think it's important that we do that in fairness to them, making sure that they can sustain themselves. And I think the third thing is that the people who were approved, have we talked about possibly providing a way for them to communicate what they do in a different format? Like if they can do a 2-minute video or 3-minute video about the services that they offer, so that a principal could bring it up and say, oh, this is what the person looks like or whatever. I don't think that, I think that one of my concerns is that in this district, we have a tendency to go with what we know and not go with anything different. And so how do we create an opportunity for these people who are coming to the table? Because we need some new ideas. There's no question about it. Okay, we can't continue to use the same people all over and over again, over and over, 505 pages, and we're not getting the results we need in this district. So we've got to try to do something to expand this. So I'd like to see that put under next steps, what we can do to make sure that principals know the opportunities that are available to them, even if that means when you have a PD or something that they're brought forward or whatever. I don't know how you're going to do it, but we need to make sure that they realize that there's some new ideas out there, because we can't continue with the old ideas and expect different results, okay?
Absolutely agreed. And that's a great idea. That's something that we can build into that next release date for the those who are responding, to provide video clips. And so just as they're able to click on the PDFs, they can click on the video clip to provide that overview. That's a great idea. Thank you.
And the final thing is that I feel, based on the needs of this district, that we need to keep this RFPQ open. I think it needs to be something that people can constantly add their ideas in for our district, because we need to make sure that we know if there's certain things that come available to our students that they can put in an application, and maybe you can, instead of having to look at 50 applications at one time, you might have an opportunity to only have to review 2 a month or something like that. I think that we should really think about keeping this door open, this opportunity open for our community to provide additional resources for us. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Belton-Cotman. Next person we have is Jennifer McCosey. Board Member McCosey. Ms. McCosey, I believe you're muted. There's no sound. Do you want to call on the cell phone? Okay, thank you. I will go ahead and see if Ms. McCosey is having technical difficulties so she can get the sound back on. We'll surely let her go ahead and make a comment or make a suggestion or any questions. I'd like to say, like I said, Dr. Mona Reynolds worked tirelessly through this whole event, working on this a compendium, putting this together. And I did go through that 500-page document, and I didn't read all of it, of course. I breezed through it, but I was looking at some important factors in there. And I just want to say by July, since July putting this together, has been, I believe, use up a great amount of her time and personal time also. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And I do believe that this is the greatest thing that happened for our community and for our schools. We have community partners that have been working with our children for decades, and they never got paid for it, and they do it on their own time. Some work out of their houses, their garages, community centers. Some come to the school and volunteer. But this is the opportunity for them to take that expertise now, finally get paid for it. And this is something I've been pushing for years, because I hate that when African-American person who loves the community and loves children come work with our kids, and the language always comes back as they can come and volunteer. And so this elementary, secondary school emergency relief fund plan, and a part of the $289 million, which has been dedicated to it, finally give these individuals opportunity to grow their brand, to work with our children, help our district, help our teachers, and help with our teachers. I've been to a couple of schools, and principals were upset because there was programs that was in their buildings previously that got canceled, or the individuals can no longer afford to come and work within the schools with their children, and it's very upset. So that's why I was so diligent working, trying to make sure that these community involvement agencies can come together and work with our kids, because our kids need it, the teachers need it, the buildings need it. And I would just like to say thank you also to Dr. Kathy Evans Brown, Paulette Woods, and also Jennifer McCosey, who came into a best self session and were trained in counseling and mentoring and counseling along with myself, along with one of the vendors. It was the community leadership team. So there were 50 people that was trained in mental health and counseling for our children that can possibly be working in the buildings with our children and the staff members. And we did that with the Best Self, a grant through Best Self. We also am working with Dr. Cass Rodriguez and MVP about getting trained now also. So there's some other vendors that we work with, that we partner with, and the Hispanic community with Dr. Cass Rodriguez. We want to make sure that those children are not left out in this process. So we are diligently working, and also with Villa Maria College, who wants to come and help put a music program within our schools, working with their music department. So we have some great things in the future heading. We want to make sure that we can continue to support this and support this program. And I know that Dr. Reynolds, you have a date in January that you want to speak on, about the next date that a group can apply, a vendor can apply for this RFPQ.
That's Monday, January 9th, 2023.
I'm sorry,
So,
I think you broke up a little bit.
Monday, January 9th, 2023.
And that's
In December, we will begin outreach and promotion of that next release date.
Great. Now, all the situations that you hear in our schools and our community partners that's helped policing our kids and working with our kids in mental health and counseling, now we have agencies and groups that's in our schools that's trained in counseling and mental health. which is very important for the growth of our children, and give them advice and working with their families also. So thank you so much. I don't want to hold this any longer. If Dr. Tanya Williams have any reflection that she would like to give, we allow her to have that time. And immediately we'll turn this over to, let's see, immediately we turn this over to Dr. Kathy Evans Brown, the chairperson, who has open remarks for the Student Achievement Program session. Thank you again. I know we went over. We're 2 hours and 43 minutes in, so I apologize for the time, but thank you for your patience, everyone.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. Yeah, we did go over a little bit, but I think it is well worth it. I think that, it was a lot of important information that was shared tonight. I do just want to make sure that in addition to us sharing kudos about the compendium to Dr. Reynolds' staff, that Dr. Brown gets some credit for those 500 pages. I know that her team worked really, really, really hard putting that compendium of assets together. So great job to the team and sharing information. I think we got some good feedback that gives us, some steps to move things forward. So thank you to everyone. And I will turn things over to Dr. Kathy Evans Brown.
Thank you so much. We're way over, but it was good information. And parents, we would like to know when we're going to get our certification for that training, that mental health training. Thank you.
Yes, best self to have email.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So this is the Student Achievement session. And the last session we had focused on student data, and we want to continue that trajectory today and moving forward. So when we talk about our student success plan, it does include a culture of learning, for our children. And data is critical. It's not the only conduit to look at student success, but it is a critical one that society decide that data is critical to know where our kids stand and where districts stand. So in terms of instructional priorities, we have to look at, those areas, math and literacy, to clarify, certain pedagogical practices that drive academic achievement. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tanya Williams to introduce Ann Botticello.
So you will hear, thank you so much, Chairwoman Dr. Evans Brown. You're going to hear a presentation from our Chief Academic Officer, Ann Botticelli. We've set a rigorous goal that we want to achieve 5 goals by 2025. And one of the main things that's entrenched within those goals is that all of our 3rd graders will leave 3rd grade reading on benchmark. That's very important. And so what you're going to hear tonight is a little bit about a universal screener that we use to measure reading proficiencies of our students. You're going to hear what it entails. You're going to hear about when we're progress monitoring to track and see if our students are on track to meet those goals. And then you're going to hear a little bit about the data and where our students are right now, how they have, in fact, demonstrated proficiency rates, or where, how they're demonstrating their learning on the beginning of year test that they took in September. I do want to give a quick kudos to Chief Botticelli. She presented at a national conference that was held here in the city of Buffalo. It was on the science of reading, and I understand that she did a phenomenal job. She is becoming an expert in her field. And so I'm looking forward to hearing tonight about our universal screener and where our children are, and how and when we will be progress monitoring to make sure that we're on track to meet our goals. I'll turn things over.
So I'm going to show you some new web pages that are available to us to showcase various documents, including the student success plan, which Dr. Williams has referenced. So I'm going to take you into the website for a moment, just so you can see the phenomenal work that the IT department has done to showcase our foundational cornerstone plans. So there's a new channel bar called Keystone Documents. When I hover over Keystone, it's going to show me 5x25, the BPS strategic plan, the student success plan, the code of conduct, the education bargain, and our professional learning plan for the district. There we go. So these form the keystone of our district. These are the most important documents that help outline the work that is taking place in the Buffalo Public Schools. So I am going to just take you into a couple. The IT department, they met with me, they met with parents, and they really tried to streamline and make this page as accessible as possible so that our community members would be able to access these really foundational documents, specifically the BPS strategic plan. So I'll first take you to the 5x25. So it's available for viewing on the website, and you can also download it. So when you go down to the bottom of the page, you have the option of downloading the actual document, or you can click on this bar and go right back to our Keystone homepage. You can go to our BPS strategic plan, and you can see all really easily accessible, all the phenomenal work that Dr. Williams put in after her listening tours and the way that we're going to be holding ourselves accountable. So I can read this document here online, or I can download it for easier access simply by clicking that button at the bottom. And then I could choose also to go back to our home Keystone Documents page. So I think my talking is a little bit ahead of the website here. But I also wanted to show you that you can do the same with the education bargain, the professional learning plan, and the code of conduct. So the phenomenal work that Dr. Brown and her team did with the code of conduct is now showcased for easy accessibility on our website. So the code of conduct itself is available for your review as well as download, the student version of the code of conduct, and then the translated versions of the code of conduct are all accessible from this website. So if I went down, we could listen to the code of conduct because this is an immersive reader opportunity if you're accessing through Edge. So we can actually listen to the code of conduct read to us in Somali, Karen, Pashto, Swahili, Kinyarwanda. So all of these options are available to our parents. And I'm just going to ask Admir if he could play quickly one of those versions for us. Yes. So we're selecting Spanish. He went over to the right side of the website, and he's going to click on Read Aloud. And the code of conduct will actually be read to us in Spanish.
Slowly.
One of our goals is always to make everything as accessible as possible for our parents. And this is one way we can optimize that accessibility through technology.
Try again. Come on.
Escuelas Públicas de Búfalo. Normas para la conducta en toda la comunidad y apoyos de intervenciones 2022 a 2025 Código de Conducta Estudiantil. Doctora Tania M. Williams, Superintendente de Escuelas, www.bufaloschol.org. Spanish.
So that's good.
Spanish.
Okay. So he's using the immersive reader, program through Edge. So parents now access our code of conduct in a language that they understand, and it will read it out loud to them. So this is one of the phenomenal features that they put together based on parent feedback. So the parents wanted this site to be more accessible. They wanted it to be easy to maneuver, and that is what IT has done for us. So I think they've just done a phenomenal job. I can't say enough. I'm going to go back to our Keystone Documents page and take us into the Student Success Plan. So we reference the Student Success Plan now is very accessible to parents. So when I hover over these pieces that look like puzzle pieces, they lay out for us the foundation of the actual Student Success Plan. I can go below to academics, and I can click on any of these tabs to take me to specific sections of the Student Success Plan. I can go to supports and services and access any of the particular supports laid out in the Student Success Plan. I can also scroll down and flip through the document itself. Or I can download it. And we've added a contribute page for feedback. So any outside community member that's looking at our documents and wants to share feedback about our plans can click on contribute page feedback, and they'll be able to populate a form for us so that we get information about what they liked, what they found easy to access, what they had questions about. I can go to out of school opportunities and access our after school program, summer programming, the community schools opportunities, and the CLRI opportunities. Family resources is under development, and we welcome suggestions, but right there you can access grade level expectations. So if you're a parent and you want to know more about what your child should be learning in school, you can access the grade level expectations documents. You could go to the BPS Information Hub for an FAQ, or you can get information on how to access Parent Portal. I'm not sure why you can't see yet what I'm talking about, but I think that this is one of the best things that IT has been able to develop for us in a long time. I know that they listened to the parents and they took their feedback, and they really, like specifically one of the things the parents said they wanted was the feedback form. So they wanted people to be able to tell us what they think about the site, what they like about the plan, what information they want to share. So I'm just going to go back to academics and make a quick connection. So I could go to K-2 under the Student Success Plan. I could look at the actual document itself, or I could break out each section by subject area. So the entire Student Success Plan is available and accessible, and we'll continue to improve this site. But I thought it was a really wonderful thing based on parent feedback, and we're very excited to show the day. So I wanted to talk a little bit about K-2 because I'm going to talk to you today about our universal screening measure. So one of the things that we do in the district to make sure that our kids are progressing appropriately, we assess them through DIBELS. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about DIBELS. You've probably heard people using that term. So I want to give you a little background information so that everything that we're doing is open and honest and makes sense to people. So Admir, if you could take me into the presentation, please.
Yeah. I'm going to put it on the TV now, Ann.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, let's check.
Thank you. So if you can go up 2 more slides. Okay, so the pillars of literacy are laid out in the National Reading Panel's report, and they explain to us the 5 big ideas behind reading. So the first is phonemic awareness. The easiest way for me to explain phonemic awareness is to say if you closed your eyes and I said a word, you would be able to identify the sounds of that particular word. So if you closed your eyes and I said child, you'd be able to hear sh, I, l, d. So you'd hear the sounds in the word child. That's phonemic awareness. That is one of the cornerstones of a student's being able to access text. they need to understand that words are made of discrete sounds. And when they put those sounds together, they form a word. Next is phonics. So knowing that the words are made of sounds, students then learn to connect those sounds to print. So they recognize that when I said ch, it's spelled with a CH, right? So that's making that connection, that alphabetic principle connection. So they understand that words are made of discrete sounds, and all those sounds are represented in English print by letters or combinations of letters. And that's basically the foundation for learning to decode. English is actually a written code, and students are code breakers when they read. So decoding is breaking down the code of the English language in print so that you can access that text. Encoding is when you spell because you're creating code. So putting phonemic awareness and phonics together, students learn to read the printed word, and then we ask them to become fluent with those words. So we have them practice word lists to become automatic when they see certain common words. And we also ask them to read text, connected text, which is a passage. So the more fluent a student is, the more they can read quickly, automatically, accurately, and with something called prosody. So prosody means when I read a sentence, I have the right intonation and inflection in my voice. I know that when I ask a question, I probably bring my voice up at the end. So that's part of fluency. Once a student has mastered phonemic awareness, phonics, and become more fluent, they are able to access more rigorous text. So we focus a lot on those three big ideas in the primary grades because you want all students by the end of third to be able to access higher orders. That's in line with the superintendent's goal that all students will leave third grade proficient at reading. In the meantime, even though a student might not yet be able to read, we've been working on their vocabulary knowledge. So we teach them words auditorily, orally, right? So they hear words and learn the meaning of words and can use the words in sentences out loud so that when they are finally able to read those words, they can attach the meaning that they've already accrued. So a student in kindergarten probably cannot read the word chrysalis, but they understand that it's a cocoon. And so once they are able to read that word by 4th or 5th grade, they automatically know what it means. So our goal is the kids learn to decode while we build their vocabulary knowledge and their background knowledge so that they can comprehend text. So those are the 5 pillars of literacy, and they're all tied together. But we have to assess whether kids are making adequate progress toward that fluent reading. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in our district. Admir, if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So RTI guidance, or response to intervention guidance from New York State, is pretty specific. We are required to screen students to see if they are at risk for not being able to read appropriately by their grade level. So screeners are supposed to be brief, efficient, and repeatable. And we're supposed to administer them 3 times a year, which is beginning of year or fall, winter, which we call MOY, middle of year, and spring, which we call end of year. So we have BOY, MOY, and EOY assessments that we use to monitor student progress. The particular tool that Buffalo selected to measure that progress is called the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills, or DIBELS. So you've probably heard people say DIBELS a lot. That's really what it stands for. So we're measuring indicators to make sure that kids are on track to decode. So we are using the 8th version of DIBELS, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the differences. So again, this comes from the New York State guidance for RTI. We are required to screen students 3 times a year, and we are required to do it grades K through 4. Admir, can you hit the next slide? So I shared this slide with you at the last work session. So it's just a quick recap. You're looking at our grade level data, K to 4, the end of year for 2021 and 21-22. So during the pandemic, especially that first year, 2021, the end of year data for the kindergarten student was 22% proficiency. you can see that almost doubled by the next year to 42%. This year, our beginning of year data, so not our end, because we haven't gotten there yet, but our beginning of year data started at 26%, which is actually higher than we ended in 2020-21. So you can actually see the trajectory in several of the grade levels. We're starting higher than we ended 2 years ago in several grade levels, which is a good thing. We want to be closer to proficiency for all of our students.
Right.
So if you look at third, for example, we're 1% higher in the beginning of the year than we were in June of 2020-21. In fourth grade, we're actually 10% higher than we were in June of 2020-21. So again, we're required to do the 3 benchmarks. The first is the beginning of year, which we usually do in September. The middle of year comes around January, and then end of year, late May, June. So we want to see students growing over time, right, from beginning of year to end of year. Now the scores you're looking at reflect a composite of several different subtests, which I'm going to talk about right now. But I'm not going to be able to get to the next slide.
Oh, I got it.
Sorry.
The camera's crooked.
Thank you.
Next slide.
Yep, next
Yes,
slide.
please.
Thank you. So this is just a quick graphic to show you the different subtests that we use to measure student proficiency. So in kindergarten, students take letter naming fluency, phoneme segmentation fluency, nonsense word fluency, and word reading fluency. So if you looked at that chart, you can see in kinder and first, they're taking all 4 of those tests. But oral reading fluency is introduced at the beginning of first grade as well. So in first grade, they're taking 5 tests. By second grade, they've added MAZE, which is a comprehension measure. So the second graders are actually taking 6 subtests. You can see that 2 of them end at first grade. So we do not do phoneme segmentation or letter naming fluency after first grade when we're benchmarking kids. Oral reading fluency, MAZE, word reading fluency, and nonsense word continue for a few grade levels. So currently we use DIBELS up to 4th grade. So in 4th grade, they would be taking oral reading fluency and the MAZE assessment. Now, if you remember, I said they had to be efficient, repeatable, and brief. Most of these measures only take 1 minute to administer. They do it one-on-one with the student. So the teacher will sit with the student and administer letter naming fluency, and it's timed. It really can't go longer than a minute. The one exception is the MAZE assessment, which is 5 minutes timed, and it's whole group. So the teacher would pass out the form to the entire class. All the other ones are a one-to-one administration, and they're approximately a minute long. Next slide, please, Edner. So I just wanted to give you a quick understanding of each test. So letter naming fluency is the primary indicator in kindergarten at the beginning of the year. So we assess students to see if they know their letters when they first come to us in September. So we time it for a minute. How many letters can the student name correctly in that span of time, in 1 minute? So the student would get this form and they would say, O, R, U, V, C, M, O, L. And we would see how many of those letters they could read correctly during that 1 minute window. Next slide, please. The next test is phoneme segmentation fluency. So remember I said phonemes are those sounds of words? So the student doesn't have any paper in front of them for this assessment. The teacher has words that they read out loud to the student, and the student indicates what the sounds of the word are. So the teacher would say a word, and the student would segment or break it into its compartment phonemes. So if the teacher said made, the student would respond with a, d. So those are the 3 sounds of the word made. It's important to remember they do not have the word in front of them because that E is silent, right? So it doesn't make a sound. So there's really only 3 sounds in the word made, even though there are 4 letters. So the teacher would give the word to the student, and the student would segment it into its appropriate sounds. So again, they're timed, and we see how many sounds they can create accurately in that minute. Next slide, please. The next test is nonsense word fluency, which sounds very bizarre. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a breakdown. So first, these are actually fake words. They are not real words. We don't want students to memorize the way a word looks and just call it back to us. So they use fake words that follow the rules of phonics for that particular grade level. So a kindergartner, for example, would be able to recognize a CVC word, consonant, vowel, consonant, with a short vowel sound. So we give them fake words, and the students are asked to sound those words out for us. That's the correct letter sound, CLS. So the student in this example would say S-ap, and then they would say R-ap for romp. So sep and romp. The line underneath indicates the student was able to recode the entire word. So this student said sep, sep, R-ap, romp. So the student not only could tell you the sounds in the word, but they could also recode it into an actual word. So this particular test is one of the primary indicators for phonics. So we're recognizing whether students hear and recognize the print for the sounds in that word, and then whether they can code it back together.
Wow.
Students could also just say sep, rop, and they would get full credit for that. So that indicates to us that they could read it automatically. It gets a little more complex as you go up through the grade levels, because phonics gets a little more complex as you go up through the grade levels. So the more difficult the phonics rules, the more difficult actual points are reading from. But again, it's called nonsense words because those are not legit words. They are words that were made up to test whether kids could apply their knowledge of phonics to a word they had never seen before. Next slide, please. This word reading fluency is actually a new test for DIBELS 8. So this one, the kids are given a list of sight words and asked to read as many as they can from the list in a timed period of a minute. The next and one of the most important tests is oral reading fluency. So again, students get connected text or a passage to read, and they are asked to read accurately and fluently. So how many words can they read from that passage, and they get a score for how correct they were and how many words they were able to read. So that's oral reading fluency. The passages are obviously a little more complex at every grade level. Next slide, please. And the final test is MAZE, which is a basic comprehension measure. So it's actually a closed passage. The students get a passage with a word missing and 3 choices to complete that passage. So in the first example, they're reading about a Mustang that he was basically restoring. So the student had those 3 choices and until pick the correct word that fit the sentence. That's what we call a closed activity. And it's a very quick measure to see if students process the text they're reading, if they comprehend. So again, this one is a timed passage, and it's administered whole group. So it's about 5 minutes long. Next slide, please. We also use DIBELS 8 to progress monitor. So another part of the RTI regulation, not only do you have to give the benchmark assessment 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end, but you are also required to progress monitor students in between. So we use the same assessment to progress monitor our students, so it's consistent and repeatable for teachers. Next slide, please. So here's our schedule. This is just a snapshot of September through December. So you can see that in September, we give the benchmark assessment, that's the boy, beginning of year. And then throughout the months of October, November, and December, we alternate testing periods for students in progress monitoring. So the red are the students who are well below grade level. So we progress monitor them the first week of October, the 3rd week of October, the 1st week of November, the 3rd week of November, etc. The yellow represents the students who are a little bit behind, and we monitor that every other week as well. And then we want to keep our pulse of the students who are actually benchmark or above, so we also progress monitor those students, but only about once a month. Next slide, please. So this is where it gets a little confusing, so please bear with me if I am repeat myself. But Again, there are 3 benchmark periods, right? The BOY, the MOY, and the EOY. So beginning, middle, and end of year. In between are the progress monitoring assessments. On this slide, they're represented by PM, progress monitoring. So we give a few progress monitoring assessments in between the benchmarks. So every assessment, the benchmark tests as well as the progress monitoring tests, are the same level of difficulty. They do not get more difficult. They are always the same. So the letters on letter naming fluency might be in a different order. Some might be capital, some might be lowercase, but the form itself is always the same level of difficulty. So you're always getting timed on letters on a page and how quickly you can read them in 1 minute. That does not change whether you're benchmarking or progress monitoring. Oral reading fluency, you might be reading passages, but every passage you read is the same level of difficulty throughout the course of the year. It does not get more difficult as the year goes on. The reason it's important to understand is that the cut score does change. So maybe in the beginning of year, you needed to know 25 letter names to be considered proficient. By the end of the year, you might need to know 45. So that cut score does get higher, even though the level of the passage or the assessment stays the same. So you're reading something that's the same level of difficulty, but you're expected to be able to do it faster and more automatically. Okay? So in the beginning of the year, again, letter naming, maybe as a kindergartner, I only need 25 letter names in a minute to be considered benchmark. But by the end of the year, I'm almost doubling that to be considered proficient, if that makes sense. So letter naming is probably the easiest one to conceptualize because it's really just letters. There's only 26 letters, and I guess there's lower and capital, so it's double. But they can't really do too much to change the difficulty of that, right? A letter is a letter. But I need to know more of those letters and more rapidly by the end of the year. Okay, next slide, please. So what are we doing to make sure our kids continue to make progress? So I told you we're assessing them, but what are we doing instructionally so that they do increase their scores throughout the year? So first, we've adopted Heggerty for phonemic awareness. So I told you that was the first pillar of literacy. We recognized that what we were doing was not sufficient. So Heggerty is an extremely explicit foundational phonemic awareness program that all of the teachers use K2 and sometimes in grade 3. They can use it whole group, and they can use it in small group if students need repeated access. So they're practicing the sounds of the language. We've created our own phonics lessons because we recognized that we needed to be more explicit with the way phonics was taught to our students. So we used the information we gained from letters training, and we created a template that we follow throughout the grade levels K to 3, following very specific explicit phonics routines. And then we've also purchased decodable books to provide practice opportunities with the phonics. So if I just learned the short A sound, the decodable book that I'm given will only use the short A sound or any other cumulative sounds I've already learned. That's why it's called decodable, because I can break the code. I've learned the short A sound, so the words on the page will use the short A and I can decode it. Right? I'm a master sleuth because I've been taught how to break the code. So I'm decoding using my decodable books. So we had decodables in the past, but we are strongly emphasizing the use of these now at K-2, and we bought a lot of supplemental decodable books for the K-2 teachers using our ARP money. Next slide, please. We are also doing a lot of training with Orton Gillingham. Remember, Orton Gillingham is a multi-sensory structured literacy approach. So the teachers go to a 5-day training and they learn how to make phonics more accessible to students by teaching much more explicitly and addressing the different senses. So they not only hear it, say it, see it, read it, and write it, right? But they also use a multi-sensory approach with things like sand. So you might see students in kindergarten tracing letters in the sand. Sometimes you just put shaving cream down and kids can trace the letters in the shade of green. They have specific documents that they use to practice their letters. I actually observed a phenomenal teacher today over at School 97. Well, actually 2 phenomenal OG teachers at 97. But they were teaching the kids how to write the letter L. So they had a very explicit template that they used. They called it a house. And she explained to the students, you start at the top of the house, at the roof, and you write the L down to the bottom, the first floor, and you don't go into the basement. And then she had kids practicing forming the letter appropriately during the course of the lesson. So they were hearing it, they were seeing it, they were reading it, they were writing it. So we're training all of our literacy coaches, our reading teachers, all of our E&L teachers, our K-8 special education teachers, all of our kindergarten teachers to use Orton Gillingham. Right now, we're using it as a tier 3 intervention. So for kids who are still struggling and need that more explicit approach. But eventually we'll phase it in so that all kindergartners start the year with Orton Gillingham, so there's no gaps in their understanding. And theoretically, we should be decreasing the number of kids that need the intervention as they move up through the grade levels. So Orton Gillingham is a method, and we also have materials that come with it. So I suppose program is the easiest way to talk about it, but it really is a method of instruction, because there's other people might provide Orton Gillingham training and have different materials than we do. Next slide, please. And I don't know if I said it, but Orton was originally designed for students with dyslexia. So that's why it's called a structured literacy program. It's very regimented and has routines that the kids can follow. And we're also providing morphology training. I think I spoke earlier about the need to build students' understanding of vocabulary, right? So, because vocabulary is one of the key, it's actually one of the keys to literacy, right? So if you have a good vocabulary, you are more likely to understand the text that you are reading. So your comprehension is affected by your vocabulary knowledge. So even when you can't read the words yet as a little student, we are building your vocabulary, your lexicon, so that when you can read those words, you automatically know what they mean. So what we're doing through the morphology training is all teachers in grades 3 to 6, literacy coaches, reading teachers, E&L, special education, they're all going to this training. It's another 5-day session, and it comes with materials that teachers can use to attack vocabulary. So they take that multisensory approach, that structured literacy approach we had in Orton Gillingham, and apply it to vocabulary. So the kids are learning Greek and Latin prefixes and roots. They are learning how to attack a word and recognize it, and there's a lot of structured repetition because we know how important it is to understand Greek and Latin and prefixes and suffixes in order to read complicated text. So the older the students get, the more complex the text gets, and the more Latin and Greek is used in the text. So for example, a lot of mathematical terms come from Greek, right? So we're teaching the kids to recognize those. How do you find that root word? If you have that meaning, you can attack a new word that you might not know. So this is, we're using it in 3 to 6, but we're also considering working with some of our 7th and 8th grade teachers as well so that they can bolster student skills. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to bookend this presentation with what we're doing at the upper grades. So we've been talking a lot about getting those 3rd graders to read and what the methods that we're doing and how we're assessing. But I just wanted to end by letting you know the great things that are happening at the high school. So here's our advanced placement data for the past 2 years. So the 2022-23 data is not from BEDS. It was in September, so it probably could have changed a little bit. But you can see that our subgroup populations increased pretty much almost across the board. So we had a total unique population of 1,647 students enrolled in AP last year. This year, we're almost at 2,000 unique students. So we're only counting them once. They may be taking multiple AP classes, but we're only counting them one time. That's why I said it's unique. You can see the different subgroups, how exponential in some cases the growth has been. And we will continue to do this work. We're partnered with Equal Opportunity Schools. They come out a few times a year. They survey students. They look to match students' interests with the courses that are offered at the school level. They work with administration and teachers to make sure that those students know that they can take the AP class, that they are well-versed in what's available at their building. And you can see, we've been working with them for a few years. You can just see each year we've continued to expand not only different classes, but offerings that match students' particular interests at their building. And our goal over the 5-year period is that every school will have a minimum of 5 AP courses available to their students. Some schools have exceeded that, and some are almost there. So thank you. I know it's late and you've been very patient, but please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Anne, for that robust presentation. It is always great to know what our children are doing and the expectations of them by their parents and their teachers. I know for me, when my granddaughter, who's now 12, was in the kindergarten, and I ran an after-school reading program at George K. Arthur, and one of the tasks each student had to do was to come in the program and read a book. So she came to me one day and she says, Nana, I don't know how to read this book. And so one of the teachers, who was a certified teacher at Buffalo Public School at the time, said to her, just circle all the words that you recognize. And she was so excited because she circled all the words that she recognized. And then she began to work with this child to understand the words that she didn't know. Today, my granddaughter's in the 12th grade and has always been on the honor roll. So my point is that it does work. These types of programs can influence young people from kindergarten to the third. They should be able to read to the third by the time they're in the 3rd grade. That's my point. It can be done. We know that it can be done. And so I'm glad that we have the resources now to really focus in on those areas. So do any board member have any questions from Anne or for Anne?
I have a question.
Okay.
So
board member.
I'm just curious because, yes, I'm just curious to know, how does the structure work? So once you identify the data and you have a child who is reading at a certain level, and I'm assuming that the principal's work are part of this, where does the ASLs fall into this?
Well, so the ASLs obviously supervise the building principal, who supervises the teachers. So when we notice that a student is struggling with reading, we automatically do a few things. First, we make sure that the core instruction they're receiving is solid. We differentiate during the reading block. And then we also provide response to intervention. So they actually walk to a teacher who's trained in whatever method we want to work with them. So if we decide that student is well below grade level and they need a lot of support at tier 3 level, they'll leave their class at the end during the reading period, RTI, and walk to a teacher who can provide them with that instruction. So we call that the walk to. And the ASLs work with the principals to make sure that's happening across the board.
Okay, are they monitored for, are the ASLs held accountable to see the progress of the school? In other words, if the school, if this class or whatever you're doing, this particular age group is not moving forward, is there an accountability piece attached to them for that?
Honestly, the teachers at the building would also have noticed that, and so if their progress monitoring is indicating that a group of students is not progressing appropriately, the whole team sits together at a grade level meeting and has a discussion about what they need to do differently to support those particular students. So that's why we run the grade level meetings.
Well, if I can just share that we've implemented something this year in the ASL, the chief is a part of it, where every 5 weeks we're having Chief Bullock's department pull a lot of data. We just had our first meeting, but we're looking not only at reading, but we're looking at 8th graders who are taking algebra, how they're doing, what percentage is being, every 5 weeks. We're looking at 7th graders and 8th graders who may be failing one or more subjects. So we already know right now at 5 weeks who those students are and in what schools. We're looking at our seniors. Do they have 15 credits or more at every single one of our high schools? We're looking at attendance. We're looking at suspensions, advanced placement classes, the DIBELS data. And it's a whole team of us from the cabinet that sit down. It includes Chief Bullock's department. She really pulls the data and assesses it. We each got a binder. This past week when we met, we're looking, our CLRI associate is at the meeting because her work supports. There are some students that may be able to accelerate. Maybe they don't need to, start at a lower pace. And so Dr. Morrell has ordered materials. And so we're working for those students to be able to move on to another level. We have Dr. Reynolds who's there because our goal is to make sure that our parents know all of what Chief Botticelli presented tonight and how they can support moving their children forward. What are some things that they can do? We do have our chief of school leadership that is a part of it so that she can hear the schools that need supports and interventions, and we can dispatch that quickly. We have Dr. Brown who's there because those sight words that you heard Chief Botticelli mention, why not have some of those words tie into our wellness and social emotional learning? So we have Chief Brown that's there. We also talked about our Saturday academies and how we're utilizing the time there. Of course, we want cultural enrichment and all of that, but we also want to encourage some academic achievement to get some of the learning loss that our students have experienced back on track. We're looking at our ELT program. We talked about the MBK program. How are we tracking and monitoring that what we're doing there is also supporting academic achievement? And so every 5 weeks for a couple of hours, we sit down and we go through all of the data points that I just shared. So it won't be a surprise to the board, to us, to parents, to anyone, if by May, it's looking like, we have a certain percentage of children that are not being successful. We will have done every 5 weeks, lots of interventions, communicating with families, and working holistically to try to address any issues they may be having.
Well, that makes me really happy. My other concern I have is for our high school students who are coming into high school not reading at a level. What are we doing for those students? Because we know that we have that problem. And if we're putting, and thank goodness you have the foresight to do such things, if we're finally getting to that point where we are using the data to drive things, my concern is that all players are held accountable accordingly. And so that means that you do not have 35 kids in a classroom in a high school and they're not reading at grade level without any supports putting in there. And so I'm glad to see you doing that, but I'm just trying to figure out how do we stop the bleeding. And one of the things, Dr. Williams, I've asked you to do is completely lay out and be transparent, completely transparent about where this district is, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because one thing I do not want it said next year this time, that this is Dr. Tanja Williams, what she created, okay? I want to be able to show a year from now, this is the improvements that were made, but this is what Dr. Williams inherited. Okay, and I think that's only fair to you in your new leadership role that this be laid out. I want to know where we are in relationship to the charter schools. I want to know where we are in relationship to everything, everyone, because for whatever reason, there's a picture being painted about Buffalo Public Schools that I don't think is totally true, and I believe it's in the data. And I'd like to see that. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing. I feel comfortable that you're going to have a handle on it. But I do want to see what can we do for these 7th and 8th graders and our high school students who are presently in those roles. How do we go to the next level? Do we bring on additional support in the buildings or whatever? But we should not be allowing children to move to high school without having them where they need to be. And I appreciate the work you're doing. And Ann, kudos to you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. We almost killed Ann up in here tonight. I want you to know that as she was waiting for the previous meeting to end, which was certainly well over its time period, and we need to look at how much we're going to put on that, she encountered a situation that impacted her in a negative way as a result of the environmental changes that happened up in here. And so we have the windows open to save our chief academic officer. Had the meeting been cut shorter, we may have not have to have her take the drugs she had to take to survive today. So let's try to make sure these meetings are on time and they're prompt and that we don't put too much in there, because our chief academic officer is in crisis right now doing this on behalf of the love that she has for the Buffalo Public Schools. Thank you, Ann, for going a 99th mile.
No problem. Benadryl, she means Benadryl.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have are you done, Ms. Belton Compton?
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to Terrence Hurd, I have board member Hurd with his hand up. Mr. Hurd?
Yes, thank you again. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Botticelli, thank you once again for a great presentation and the body of work that you're doing. I hope that your health is okay. If you gotta leave, leave, okay? Or you don't want anything to happen to you. You gotta protect you. Kudos to the adjustment to the website with the Keystone documents and the student success plan. I know, and also remember having the professional learning plan, you know, that you spoke so highly of, and the learning, the pillars of literacy. So thank you for that work. Now the testing is going to be 3 times a year. So what happens when the testing, say if a person academic performance improve or decrease between the fall and winter, and what adjustments do you make in the spring to counteract that?
So a student might make enough growth that they are deemed proficient, in which case we might remove them from tier 3 if that is the committee's decision. So the teachers get together at the grade level and have that kind of conversation. Or if we see they're not making sufficient progress, we might add another layer of intervention. So it does vary depending on the student.
Okay, my question is, how do you add the layer of more intervention when they're going through their constant day of schoolwork that's constantly progressing, and then they might be involved, maybe have to leave because they get on the bus and go home early, or go home you know, at dismissal, or they might not have enough free time during the school. I mean, what can be done? I know you got the Saturday Academy.
We have a period of time. We set aside a period of time during the day to provide intervention. So there's a period for reading and a period for math on top of their core program. So that a K through 3 student might have 90 minutes of regular reading instruction and then an additional 30 minutes for intervention if it's needed. If it's not, we accelerate.
Okay, well, how many days a week would that be? Because, you know, my goal is also to keep the child's interest also. And, you know, sometimes you got to make school fun, you know, for them to learn.
So it's 5 days a week for both reading and math. And I would say that students are really excited when they're reading they're on track. So you should see how happy they are. Similar to what Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown was talking about with her daughter. When they break that code, there's nothing more satisfying to a child because they can suddenly access any text that's out there. So I would say it doesn't really bore them when they see that success. I was just looking at one school's progress monitoring for a group of students who are in Orton-Gillingham, and the growth is incredible. It's obviously not every student, but this particular group I was looking at were really making some great gains. So they went from not being able to read at all, at zeros on their baseline score, and then you could see the growth across the progress monitoring periods. So I guarantee those kiddos are extremely excited about the difference it's making for them.
Okay, just 2 more things. Does this program offer like a reward for these children who's working diligently and extra hard? And also the last question would be, a lot of times when a child shows these inabilities to be able to read or write or picture sounds, it might be generational. What are we doing for family members also, so they can also understand and possibly read and learn how to read along with their siblings? Okay.
So 2-part question. So the first part, no, the program doesn't come with a built-in reward system. That would be on the teacher at the classroom level to determine an extrinsic reward for the students. The intrinsic motivation when you become proficient at reading, I think, is often enough for a lot of the kids, but you're right. There might be some students that need a different type of motivation, but that's not built into the program. The second part of your question, we are actually working with Dr. Reynolds and her team. We're rolling out raising a reader training for all the kindergarten parents across the district, so that they learn some strategies to work at home with their students reading. So we send home books with our pre-K and K students every week, and we're going to work with the parents so they have a method to sit with the student and help them feel comfortable with books and understand how to love reading. So we give those parents strategies that they can use to talk about the books with their students. And then I know Dr. Reynolds, I can't remember if she mentioned it earlier, but her team is working on a number of videos and trainings and things to use with parents to help them feel more comfortable with the work with their student. And then we also have the grade level expectations that we share with parents, which has a number of tips down the side for things that parents can do at home.
Okay. Yeah, I know a lot of times, you know, it's the parents or caregivers, you know, or maybe an elder grandparent, you know, who may be raising a child who might not understand, you know, all the terminology and reading or things like that. So, and it really comes from the home about, you know, persuading the child to read at an early age and buying books and get them interested in reading. Most children are, but there's some that still, you know, because of the slighted family, you know, they don't really have those characteristics to encourage the child to read or teach them how.
Well, if anyone's interested, if anyone's interested in coming, we're going to be giving some dates out for community schools events where we'll be working with the parents on reading strategies. So I'll be sure to make sure the dates.
Great. Thank you again for your work.
Okay, thank you, Terrence. I see Board Member Scott's hand up.
Thank you, Dr. Evans-Brown. Just want to say I don't really have any questions, but just want to share that this is the work that I live daily, as far as the benchmarking, progress monitoring, response to intervention. I'm actually putting together a presentation right now on RTI process and CSE eligibility. And I hope you don't mind, Ms. Botticelli, but I may be stealing some of your slides for that presentation. It really, I think, reading is complex, and you really broke down in an understandable way the intricacies of reading very well. So,
she did.
I think what you just mentioned about having some sessions in our Saturday academies for parents, I think would really have a significant impact. And just the last thing I'll say is I know this is happening because I have kids in the system. And especially with my younger son, we just got the Dibble, we requested the Dibble scores. So we were able to look at those. It was done last year. It's been done since he's been in school. And last year he began the year struggling quite a bit with reading and received that intervention and that help. And the growth was incredible. Little bit of a dip after the summer because I think we spent too much time playing baseball and not reading, but we're getting back up there. So thank you, Ms. Botticelli. And the Keystone, what do you call it? The Keystone documents, those are unbelievable. I'm so glad that those are up on the main page, and I will be sharing those widely.
Great. Thank you, Larry.
Please do share them. And Mike Strangio and Angela Ryan in the IT department under the leadership of Juliana Shalino did some phenomenal work, and they're going to continue to upgrade our website under Dr. Williams' leadership. So there's a lot of streamlining that's going to take place. So the Keystone is the start, but keep looking at the website and the school websites because you're going to see some big changes.
Great. Larry, question: what grade is your youngest in?
He just entered 4th.
Okay, so there's a product right there. Okay, thank you.
And I just actually saw his state assessment results, which I didn't know were available, and that's showing some positive outcome there.
Okay, there's an example of what Dr. Williams is striving to do for all of our children. Thank you for that. Paulette, Board Member Paulette Wood's hand is up.
I'm not usually so overwhelmed, enthusiastic, and so happy about a presentation from our Chief Academic Officer, Ann Botticelli. But Madam Superintendent, 5 in 2025, you've laid it out. And I have to give you the greatest respect, the kudos. Every person who watched this, you broke out dibbles. Everybody's about dibbles.
I know.
You spelled it out. You broke it out. You gave the steps. Everyone who watched this can be proud to know, yes, we can make a difference and we can regain the enthusiasm that every child comes to us with to read and to learn and that joy of learning. You are right. When you open the ability to read, it solves every problem. They can read their math. They can enjoy books. They can travel. All I can say is I am so proud of the presentation, the work from the superintendent. God bless you. And parents, hey, we got to applaud this. We're working.
Good job. Good job. Buffalo is moving along. So are there any other questions from board members? If not, I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Williams to close out for this evening. It's 8:33 p.m.
I just want to say phenomenal presentation from all of our presenters. As you saw, Chief Betticelli has laid it out very comprehensively, very easy to understand. Those documents that are up on our Keystone documents, Chief Shalino came on board just about 2 months ago, but she has hit the ground running. There is nothing that we have asked for that she has not been able to deliver. She finds a way. So everyone is rowing in the same direction. We are all working together, and I know that we are going to see some great outcomes.
Yay. All right. So with that will close out our student achievement session for this evening. Everybody be safe. Have an enjoyable night. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Great job.